It's Saturday night in Colorado Springs. And store clerk Claretta Chandler is minutes away from wrapping up her shift.
She's ringing up a purchase for a woman inside the store.
Hey, listen, I was thinking about buying a lottery.
And as she's ringing, they hear this pop.
This caused both of them to give each one kind of a quizzical look, like, what did we just hear? Was that a car backfire?
As they're standing there, just trying to put it together what might have happened, they hear a second pop, and then...
Oh my god, oh my god. Oh my god.
I need an ambulance.
Across town, Lt.Joe Kenda is winding down after another long day.
It was the time of night when it was time for me to get some sleep if I could. Then the phone rings and you go, no bed tonight.
It's Kenda.
I never seem to get the criminals who break the law in the morning. Oh, no.
That store again?
It's always the cover of darkness.
All right, I'm on the way.
"15 minutes later, Kenda arrives at the scene and is greeted by Detective Brian Ritz.
So here we are again, huh?
Here we are again.
Who do we got this time?
Victim's ID is Willie McKay. He's 20. Took a gunshot wound to the chest, probably an exit wound, and then collapsed inside the store. And he's at Memorial Hospital right now.
What happened?
Witnesses say it happened over here in the lot, and then he walked inside the store. What we don't know is exactly where in the lot he actually got shot.
Usually with a firearm, you get some kind of shell casing. So we're looking for physical evidence that might help identify the exact location of the scene.
Even if investigators happen to find shell casings in the parking lot, there's no guarantee they were discharged during this particular incident.
It's been an open-air drug market in that particular area for quite a few years, no matter what police efforts have been put in there.
It would not be uncommon to find expended casings and slugs in this parking lot that had nothing to do with the shooting of Willie McKay.
But then, Kenda hits pay dirt.
Hey, Brian. We got 2 380 casings. We got drops of blood here. They look fresh. Might have happened right here. How you doing? We got 2 casings. Want to go ahead and process those? The EMTs mentioned the exit wound, right?
We did.
Let's see if we can find a slug.
The human body is very dense, so a great deal of the energy of the bullet is absorbed by passing through the body and is generally close in the area where the victim was found. We search the lot and we do find a perfectly formed .380 caliber slug.
Think this is our guy?
It's gotta be him. But there, still got bullet wipe on it.
Bullet wipe is human blood that is seared onto the surface of the slug by the heat of this projectile passing through the body at supersonic speed.
We're pretty sure that we're looking at the bullet that struck our victim.
Hey, Lieutenant. We got a witness back here. Says he basically saw the whole thing go down.
All right, we'll talk to him. Why don't you go inside, see what you can find.
The uniformed officers at the scene introduced us to an individual named James McGraw.
Mr. McGraw?
Yes.
I'm Lieutenant Kenda. I understand you were outside when this all happened?
I was standing over there by my car.
It was pretty crazy to see this all unfold. I kind of knew something bad was about to happen. I just had a gut feeling. And all of a sudden, this car pulled up. The 2 guys kind of got into a rumble. They were going at it for like a few seconds, and then the dude pulled out the gun and shot it up in the air. I was frozen. I couldn't really move. I was just kind of stuck in the moment.
After that, all hell kind of broke loose. Then I saw another guy get into a guy's face and throw a punch. And at that point, they heard a second gunshot.
The guy was standing in the parking lot like he was in a total daze. So then he made his way towards the convenience store. I kind of started to make my way in there. When I walked into the store, the victim had fallen to the floor, and it was blatantly obvious he had a chest wound.
Can one of you get a paper towel or a rag or something? Hang in there, buddy.
I'll never forget the sound of the gurgling and the dress he was taking. I mean, it was really hard to watch.
Hang in there, buddy.
You happen to hear anything they were saying? Any names?
No. All I know is there's really bad blood between these people.
This confrontation goes to the max the minute those people arrive, which is a clear indicator that there is prior involvement between these individuals, and they don't like each other.
Well, thank you for your cooperation. He's free to go.
Got this one.
After questioning James McGraw, Kenda enters the store, where Detective Ritz has located another key piece of evidence.
At this point in 1995, convenience stores have gotten wise to the fact that it's handy to have video cameras mounted, mostly because they get robbed so much.
Witnesses make mistakes, witnesses get emotional, witnesses don't see things that are there to be seen. Cameras see everything.
So who's working the counter, Coretta?
Yeah, I just talked to her. She says the cameras are all working.
Good, I told her after the last time they need to be fixed.
She went to get the tapes.
Here you go, Joe.
Excellent. Thanks, Coretta.
Good luck.
Appreciate it. Yeah, we'll take a look at these when we get back to the station.
Yeah.
First, let's go to the hospital, see if we can find out anything about the victim.
Sounds good.
At Memorial Hospital, detectives learn Willie McKay is hanging on by a thread.
Ritz and I go to the intensive care unit waiting room, and we find Tina Parker, who is Willie's sister.
How are you, Miss Parker? We're all hoping that Willie pulls through. And I know it's a very difficult time, but there's a few questions that we need to ask.
He's a good brother. He's been down on his luck a little bit, but he didn't deserve this.
We asked him, do you know if your brother, Willie, has any enemies or people he's had trouble with in the recent past?
You know, there's this guy named D. They've been going at it for a while.
Is that his name, D?
That's what everyone calls him. I don't know his name personally, but there's been bad blood. I've seen it with my own eyes. About 2 weeks ago, I was taking the trash out behind our place.
What's up with that? You trying to bring me down?
Ain't talking Vivid's truth, huh?
Talking, man. Best to shut your mouth.
What?
So now we not only have D hating Willie, D has a gun.
After they were fighting, Willie just went back inside the house. D, I don't know where he went.
While we're talking with Tina, the intensive care unit doctor comes in, and it's pretty clear to us he has some sinceries to tell her.
I'm sorry. We did everything we could. We just couldn't save your brother.
I'm very sorry.
As we were leaving, I just said to her, I will find who hurt your brother. That's what I do.
Back at headquarters, detectives hope the security tapes from the convenience store will be the key to identifying Willie's killer.
Yo.
You have to keep in mind, at that point in time, this was old, grainy, black and white tape.
The quality is just awful. Somebody's own mother couldn't recognize them in this tape.
Can't make out what's going on.
It's just a lot of pushing and shoving.
Yeah.
The tape clearly shows an altercation in the store's parking lot, but that's just about the only thing that is clear. However, the video's not entirely useless.
What's that in the rear window of the car the shooter's getting in? Almost looks like a temporary tag. Well, that means the car's been purchased in the last month. Yeah, but from where? Yeah, it looks like a Honda.
How many could there be? They were sold to an African American between 28 and 30 years of age who goes by the nickname D.
We have to hope that it's a local dealer, but it is at least a lead.
What the dealer can probably produce for us is a name. And once I have a name, we're in business. We're investigating the shooting death of Willie McKay at a local convenience store. Right now, the only leads I have are a grainy video and a guy who once threatened Willie, who goes by the name of D.
The following morning, Detective Brian Ritz returns with an update.
So it turns out that car was leased not 3 weeks ago to a guy named Dirk Waters.
Wonder if Dirk Waters is our man D.
Dirk Waters' home address is less than 3 blocks from our crime scene. You go check it out?
Sure. Kenda here. Really? Okay, be right down. And get this. Looks like we don't have to go looking for Dirk Waters.
You kidding?
Yeah, he's downstairs with somebody. Says they want to come forward as witnesses.
Our fortune increases dramatically.
How you doing? I'm Lieutenant Kenda, that's Detective Ritz.
How you doing? I'm Dirk Waters. How you doing, sir? Dirk Waters.
Hi, Angela Cotter. Hey.
I understand you two were outside when Willie McKay was shot?
Yes, sir. We just came here to explain to you what we witnessed.
We don't have any probable cause to believe this guy is a suspect. And in our initial conversation, it's really more of a conversation, not an interrogation.
But all of that changes in an instant.
When we saw in the newspaper this morning that the guy died, I told D we should go to the police and say something.
Well, my.
You go by D?
Yes, sir, I did.
We now know that this is at least a good suspect.
Angela, why don't you go with Detective Ritz? Mr. Waters, if you come with me.
Okay.
So you always separate individuals so that there's no collusion going on between the storytelling.
Have a seat.
So tell me about last night.
It was me and a group of friends just kicking it in the apartment. Around 9 o'clock, me and Angela decided we wanted to get some snacks from the store. There was a guy, Junior, at the apartment. Didn't really know him, but he was like a friend of a friend. He decided to ride with us.
Dirk Waters explains that while Angela was inside the store, he and Junior were hanging out in the parking lot.
We kicking it outside, and next thing you know, Willie pulled up.
I said don't call me that.
So Willie just came out of nowhere? Why? Did you know him?
Waters explains that he knows Willie from a social perspective.
Met him through a friend. But lately, he's just been tripping, bugging out on me, saying I have a thing for his sister.
I understand it, yep. So little. Yeah, they very comfortable. Walking here.
Dana! What's going on? Talk to me. Hey, bro, what's up if you having eyes for my sister, dog? Or you a married man, cuz you can't be doing that.
You better watch your mouth, boy.
Maybe I should call the MPs down at Fort Carson, man. Don't know you've been cheating on your wife.
This infuriates Waters because he had been in the Army for 8 years. He intends to make the Army his career. The military has very strict rules about adultery. They see it as a crime.
Sounds like he really pissed you off. Pissed enough to shoot him?
I didn't shoot him.
Here's the thing. We have eyewitnesses that saw you fire a gun after fighting with him a couple weeks ago. Are you saying that wasn't you either?
He immediately admits to it.
Yeah, I did it.
I was so angry, I pulled out a handgun that I had and I fired in the air to make Willie go away.
So at the store, maybe that was a chance to finish things once and for all?
I'm telling you, man, I didn't shoot him. It looked weird, but I ain't shoot that guy. As soon as we heard the gunshot, we got the hell on, me, Angela, and Joe.
Dirk goes on to explain that people in the neighborhood, they all know that there's bad blood between Willie and I. And when I saw in the paper that Willie had died, I thought I better get down here to the police station and explain myself.
That's why I came down.
In an adjoining interview room, Detective Ritz is pressing Angela for her version of what happened.
I didn't know anyone actually got shot until I read it in the paper this morning.
Is that right?
Angela tells me she's inside the convenience store. She hears the commotion and she hears the shot. As she comes out of the convenience store, Dirk grabs her and Junior and says, "Let's get out of here."
So you didn't see the shooter?
No.
All right, what happened next?
We just dropped Junior off at some corner, and then we went back to my friend's apartment.
Okay, where's Junior now?
I don't know.
Told you I just met the guy. I haven't seen him since.
When people talk to me in difficult circumstances, I believe no one. You're saying A, I hated Willie. You're saying B, I fired a gun within 3 feet of Willie on a prior occasion 2 weeks ago. But oh, I didn't fire this gun.
Even though Kenda and Ritz have their doubts about Dirk and Angela's story, they have nothing concrete on which to hold them.
Nothing led to probable cause to believe that they had committed a crime. So we took their statements and subsequently let them go out the front door of the police station.
Dirk Waters still remains at the top of Kenda and Ritz's suspect list until a tip comes in that takes the investigation in a whole new direction.
Hey, Lieutenant. So we just got a phone call from somebody asking if we'd picked up David Reese yet for the murder of Willie McKay.
Who's David Reese?
Pull this file. He's a late 20s African-American male, just got out of prison. Can you guess his alias?
Junior.
Bingo.
Well, now that fits very nicely. Because Dirk says, and Angela says, the third person in the car was Junior.
What do you know? Maybe our friend Dirk is telling us the truth after all.
Don't ever assume you're right until you know you are. There is never, ever an end until you reach it. This investigation all along has said that Dirk, aka D, is the person we're looking for. But now we've discovered there's another individual who may be the one. What I don't know yet is what his motive is.
Our informant also told us that Junior here is staying in an apartment complex over on the east side.
Okay, let's set up on that place, see what kind of activity's going on before we move in. Right? Thanks.
Less than an hour later, Detective Brian Ritz is on the east side with his eyes fixed on a ground floor apartment.
It's a very important part of police work, is sometimes just watching, listening, and looking.
Someone approaches the apartment door, but it's not who Ritz was expecting.
I'm looking for a black male to go into this room, and I see a young white female, something we didn't expect.
We're dealing with an anonymous informant. How accurate is this? Well, there's only one way to find out.
It's time to end the stakeout and start making contact. You're not going in with guns drawn or anything like that, because it could be completely innocent. But you're on alert.
May I help you?
Ma'am, my name is Detective Brian Ritz. What's your name?
Where are you based?
Ms. Bates, I'm looking for Junior. Do you know him?
Yeah, Junior's my boyfriend.
Is he here?
No?
Do you mind if I come in for a second?
Sure. So how may I help you, Detective?
How long have you known Junior?
A few months now.
I'm investigating the shooting down at the mini-mart the other night.
Miss Bates says she happened to be with D, Junior, and Angela the night that Willie got shot.
We were at one of Junior's friends' apartments and we were just, drinking and chilling.
Maria painted a scene in which everybody was drinking. Dee was playing around with a gun, and he was getting more and more agitated, talking about this person he knew that was telling lies about him.
Forget that. Trying to snitch on me, talking about cheating on my wife. You know what that'd do to my career? They give me a dishonorable discharge.
When did they leave?
I don't know exactly what time, but they did go to make a liquor and snack run. They came back about an hour later.
She said when they came back,
What is going on with your face?
Junior had a cut on his face,
Hit you?
and that everybody was very upset.
What's going on, guys?
Nothing.
Come on, let's just get out.
Yes, I'm calling to see if Willie McKay was admitted.
Hey, man, come on. Baby, nothing. I ain't talking to her.
Oh. He's dead.
What happened after that?
Junior and I left.
Where is he now?
I don't know. I haven't seen him since yesterday.
We need to hear from you if you see him again, if he calls, anything.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
We have a statement from Angela that they dropped Junior off on the road and then went home. Now we have Maria saying that Junior, Angela, and Dee showed up at the apartment.
Detective Ritz wonders, had Dirk and Angela been lying during their initial interview? Or was Maria lying to them now in order to cover for Junior? Kenda finds out the answer that afternoon.
We recover enhanced images from the videotape. They're certainly not perfect, but it's clear in one of these photos that when Willie comes in and falls across the counter, Angela is standing inside the store.
Kenda decides it's time to haul Angela Cutter back down to the station for another interview.
I don't think you've been truthful with us.
What do you mean?
Well, you said you didn't hear Willie had been shot till you'd read it in the newspaper. Looks to me like he's bleeding out right in front of you. Why don't you just tell me the truth? You know who shot Willie.
It was Junior. He shot him. I was afraid to say anything because, Junior just got out of prison. I thought he'd come after me and Dirk if we snitched.
She finally says that when this confrontation happens, Willie and Dee are yelling at each other. And Junior pulls out a gun and fires a shot in the air.
Angela tells Kenda that after Junior fired that first shot, Willie McKay took the confrontation to the next level.
Junior is a street person. He's been in jail. He doesn't tolerate this behavior from people. You hurt me? Watch this.
So you gonna shoot me?
Willie then staggers inside the store.
Kenda and Ritz have what they need to arrest David Reese, aka Junior. Reese is ultimately convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Dirk Waters and Angela Cutter are never charged.
Human emotion is an incredible thing. It can create circumstances that result in violent death. This particular case, Willie McKay's anger and emotions were out of control, and he paid the ultimate price for it.
Coming up, a vicious attack leaves an elderly man on the brink of death. The case seems cut and dried, but Kenda smells a rat.
If you lie to me, I'm going to find out, and you're not going to like it when I do.
After helping win a conviction in a hard-fought double homicide case, Lt.Joe Kenda is celebrating with a little light housekeeping.
It's always a very good feeling when you end a case with the incarceration of the accused. But those moments of success can be interrupted by someone walking into your office and telling you what your next problem is.
Hey, Lieutenant, I just got something. I think you're going to be a part of this.
What's up?
A woman just called from the hospital, and she claims that her 97-year-old father, John Howard, was attacked.
What the hell? 97?
What a horrible thing. 97 years old and you've been assaulted? How could this be? Well, it's easy, really. There are humans on this planet.
What's his condition?
Not really sure, but it doesn't sound good.
Let's get down there.
When you get a call like this, various scenarios start running through your mind.
We only know what we've been told. He's been assaulted and he may die as a result.
Hello, I understand you have John Howard here?
Yes, he was admitted 9 days ago.
9 days?
I'm troubled by the fact that we're 9 days into this before we even know about it. Time is your enemy in criminal investigations.
Yes, he was admitted due to blunt force trauma to the side of his head. His jaw was broken in 2 spots.
How is he now?
Not well. He went through surgery okay, but he was so weakened that he got pneumonia. He's in ICU.
Surgery is difficult at any age, but it's very difficult for an elderly person to survive pneumonia. He's basically near death.
Would it be possible to speak to him?
Sure, he's in room 114, just down the hall.
Thank you.
Inside John Howard's room, Kenda meets the man's daughter, Jamie, who's keeping vigil by her father's side.
Jamie Howard?
Yes.
I'm Lieutenant Kenda, the Detective Arms. You called us?
Yes.
How's your father?
He's stable. It's tough, but he's a fighter.
Jamie, can you tell us exactly what happened?
Well, he's been a patient at Norton's nursing home for about 8 years. And I thought it was a great place until today. I don't know.
Jamie explains that earlier that morning she drove down from Denver for a surprise visit with her father. But when she arrived at the nursing home...
Hey, Dad? Dad? Hey, Dad?
Her dad was nowhere to be found.
What the hell?
Where's my father? John Howard.
John Howard?
Yes.
He fell and hurt himself. He was taken to St. Francis Hospital. Been there over a week.
A week? Why didn't somebody tell me?
I'm sorry.
She immediately drove to St. Francis Hospital and was horrified when she saw the condition her father was in. The bandaging, the bruising, the respirator, intensive care. He looked horrible.
Fist in eye.
What she heard him say was simply fist in eye. He didn't make any other comments, and that's all she heard.
I looked at him in the bed, and there's not a mark on his arm. The only mark is on his face. Unless he found a way to fall and land on his face only, he didn't fall down.
Somebody did this to him. And I find it a little weird that they didn't immediately tell me about it.
Well, you did the right thing by calling us. We'll get to the bottom of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it an accident? Is it intentional? Could be either one. We are beginning with an injured patient. We have to end with an explanation for how this injury occurred.
Detectives begin their investigation at Norton's nursing home, where John Howard's injury allegedly took place.
We see a 30-something nurse talking to a woman in her 70s. And as we approach, the young nurse nervously walks away immediately.
Excuse me. I'm Lieutenant Kenda, Detective Arms, from the Colorado Springs Police Department. Can we speak to the manager here, please?
That would be me, Olga. Olga Pratt. I'm the owner and head of nursing here.
Ma'am, we're investigating an injury to one of your residents, John Howard, about 9 days ago. I understand he fell.
Yes, that was quite a fall.
Nurse Janet York told Olga what she witnessed.
She walked by Mr. Howard's room and heard some moaning coming from inside the room.
Mr. Howard? Hello? Oh my God! Mr. Howard, Kenny, what happened?
I don't know. He must have hit his head on the toilet. I just turned around for a second to grab something and I heard him fall.
Nurse Janet and the orderly, Kenneth Brzezinski, helped Mr. Howard to his bed.
Janet thought it was best to get an ambulance, so she called 911, and he was immediately transported to St. Francis.
I'm always curious about who is present when bad things happen. Where is Kenneth Brzezinski right now?
Can we speak to Kenneth?
Oh, he's not here. If a patient is injured in the care of an orderly, well, the policy is immediate suspension.
Ms. Pratt, I have to tell you that according to John's daughter, he said he was punched.
She says, well, Mr. Howard has been a difficult patient.
Mr. Howard has quite the reputation for making up stories around here.
On many occasions, he has claimed abuse by orderlies, but in every one of those cases, it was just orderlies doing their job, and no one abused him.
Okay, well, we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Of course.
That afternoon, detectives run a background check on Kenneth Brzezinski.
So we got some fun.
37. He's an Army vet. He's worked at the nursing home for 6 months, but his record there is spotless and no prior arrests.
I want to get a hold of Mr. Brzezinski and see what he has to say.
So I intend to get an explanation from him as to exactly where he was when this injury occurred. Did he witness the fall or only the aftermath?
Hey, sorry to mean to interrupt you guys.
As I was considering that, a knock comes on the door.
There's a woman out front, goes by the name of Janet, said she would like to speak with you.
Send her in.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's the witness and assistant to his injury. And she is further the very same nurse I just saw at Norton's, who nervously walked away as we presented our badges.
Thanks for coming in. Have a seat.
Thank you.
So I didn't get a chance to talk to you earlier. You kind of scurried away?
Yeah.
I wanted to remind her that I knew she'd walked away from me, and she was immediately nervous again.
So what can we do for you?
Well, I have some information on John Howard. It's important, but I don't know what to do.
Well, if it was important enough to bring you here, that's important enough to tell us.
His injury, it wasn't a slip and fall.
Well, my, Janet. Now we're getting into an area that I understand well. We're investigating an injury that occurred to a 97-year-old nursing home patient when a nurse named Janet York comes forward to my office to say that she knows this injury was not the result of an accidental fall.
So what exactly happened?
I was walking by Mr. Howard's room when I heard moaning. So I went in. What's going on? What happened to his face?
Guess I lost it. I hit him.
Janet tells Kenda that the man who assaulted Mr. Howard was the orderly, Kenneth Brzezinski.
Thank you for coming. We'll take care of this. Skip, why don't you go over to the nursing home and have another chat with the owner, Miss Pratt. I'll send Fiorello to pick up Mr. Brzezinski.
Yes, sir. Right this way, ma'am.
So I assigned Detective Ken Fiorello to locate and arrest Kenneth Brzezinski for one count of assault on the elderly.
Excuse me. Are you Kenneth Berzinis?
Yeah.
Detective Fiorillo. I need to ask you some questions about what happened to John Howard.
Look, I'm not gonna lie to you. Somebody hit him.
Let's talk about it at the station.
From the outset of his interview, Kenneth Berzinis seems eager to tell the truth.
Okay, Kenneth, let's start from the beginning. Go ahead and tell me what happened.
Okay, I started working at the nursing home about 6 months ago. I was warned about Mr. Howard that he could be difficult. But I'm a vet. Compared to what I went through in Vietnam, this was nothing. All right, how are we doing today, Mr. Howard?
What are you doing?
Oh, come on. No reason to get upset. It's a nice day outside.
Close the window. Get the hell out of here.
What he needed to do was to get Mr. Howard out of bed so he could sort of remake the bed. When he tried to do that, Mr. Howard was resisting his efforts and was screaming and yelling.
I told you you did it.
All of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mr. Howard raise his fist. Something in me just, oh my God, triggered.
So you mean to tell me you couldn't dodge a punch thrown by a 97-year-old man?
I don't know what happened. I'm sorry, and I'm ashamed. I know he was hurt really bad. I didn't mean to react that way.
Okay, Kenneth. I believe you. But Olga says that you told her that he slipped and fell in the bathroom. Now, why lie about that?
Berzinis looked at Fiorillo in absolute shock and said, I told her I hit him. And I hurt him badly, and I was afraid that maybe I killed him.
I never lied. I told Olga exactly what I told you, I swear.
Okay, Kenneth. I believe you. I do. Thank you for being honest with us.
With Kenneth Berzinis' confession in tow, Kenda sets his sights on a bigger fish, Olga Pratt.
We have a conspiracy that involves the owner of a nursing home. How deep does this go?
Other staff told us that there in fact had been a meeting that was held at the nursing home.
This whole thing with Mr. Howard, it was a terrible accident. And that's going to be our story, got it? Anything else gets out, this place is ruined.
Armed with these additional statements implicating Olga Pratt in the cover-up, Kenda puts the squeeze on her.
Thanks for coming in, Miss Pratt. There were just a few things we wanted to go over.
How can I help you, detectives?
We just need a little clarification on what happened to Mr. Howard. He fell in his bathroom. Is that right?
That's right. He took quite a spill, so obviously we had him taken to the hospital right away.
That's strange. That's not what Kenneth Berzinis told us. He says he told you that he hit Mr. Howard.
Well, quite frankly, Lieutenant, you'd be a fool to believe anything Kenneth Berzinis has to say.
You know, right away you could see that she had an attitude. She was smug, and it was almost like an insult to her that we were questioning what she had already told us.
Well, I guess we're fools then, because I believe he's telling the truth. And we talked to several of your staff members that confirmed it.
Olga Pratt is willing to do anything to save her business and herself. Now, is it against the law to lie to the police? No, not against the law to do that. But it's against the law to engage in a conspiracy to conceal assault on the elderly, and that's what we're going to charge her with.
Miss Pratt, I'm afraid you're under arrest.
What? Arrest? What for? But I haven't done anything.
Miss Pratt, please come with me.
No, this is outrageous. I have responsibilities.
Olga Pratt is convicted of accessory to crime and conspiracy to commit accessory to crime. She is sentenced to 4 years probation.
The scary reality of this case is that we're all vulnerable, especially when you're old and can't really take care of yourself, that you're putting your life basically in strangers' hands.
As for Kenneth Berzinis, He is also sentenced to probation and ordered to serve 2 years in a work release program.
I feel sorry for Kenneth Bruzenis. He had emotional issues from serving his country in Vietnam, and he's been completely cooperative. But the fact remains he assaulted and nearly killed a 97-year-old man with his bare hands. And you have to be punished for that.
Despite his trauma, John Howard makes a full recovery and lives out the rest of his days in Colorado Springs, albeit at a different nursing home.
I believe this case was ultimately driven by greed. Olga Pratt made the decision that all of this should be concealed from the authorities, believing it would never come to light. Had it not been for the concerns of a daughter, she might have been right.
They say the quietest towns hide the loudest secrets, and on the edge of Northern California, where the redwoods swallow the sky and the coastline folds into jagged cliffs, one night in the fall of 1979 carved a wound that never closed. It begins with a scream no one heard, a road with no lights, and a girl who should have made it home in 15 minutes but never did. Her name whispered through the decades like a broken headline. Missing teen vanishes on coastal highway. No clues found. And long after the search team scattered, after the posters faded, after her family stopped answering calls from reporters, the case remained frozen in a kind of darkness that felt almost deliberate, as if whatever happened out there refused to let itself be remembered. The story resurfaces like a tremor, a cold gust rolling in from the Pacific, shaking loose fragments of a night most people wished they could forget. It begins with the car, a faded blue Pontiac abandoned at mile marker 47, engine still warm, driver's door left open like someone had stepped out mid-breath. Headlights cutting across empty asphalt, radio buzzing with static, a single sneaker lying in the dirt. Deputies found it before sunrise, when dawn painted the cliffs gold and gulls circled overhead like impatient witnesses waiting to testify. A breeze carried the smell of salt water and fir needles down the ravine, and even then, before any report was filed, before any mother was woken by a knock on the door, the scene felt wrong. Too quiet, too still, too staged. Locals gathered along the guardrail, their whispers racing faster than the patrol cars. Cold case in the making, a fisherman muttered, tapping ashes into the wind. This stretch of highway eats people. But the sheriff's department wasn't ready to call it that. Not yet. They hoped the girl was hiding or scared or angry or anywhere but the truth that felt written in the dirt by the tire tracks that suddenly stopped, as if the car had drifted to a halt by an invisible force. Her name was Rachel Arden, 17, senior year, straight-A student, drama club, part-time waitress at the local diner, the girl with the bright laugh and the habit of waving at neighbors she hardly knew, the girl who told her mother she'd be home by 10. She never made it to 10. Her mother, Irene, called the sheriff at 10:42. By 11:15, an officer was knocking on her door. By midnight, deputies were combing the cliffs with flashlights, their beams slicing across the black ocean below, glowing like thin swords fighting a losing battle against the night. Every minute deepened the gravity of what they were facing. Rachel wasn't the kind of girl to run away. She wasn't the kind of girl to leave her car on the highway. And when they found her purse still inside, untouched, nothing stolen, nothing disturbed, the phrase, "foul play suspected," entered the report like a curse. The investigation began with urgency, reporters flooding the town with cameras and microphones, capturing tearful pleas, shaky statements, officers ducking questions as if words themselves were traps. Headlines printed themselves overnight. California teen vanishes, mystery rattles coastal town. Highway disappearance sparks fear of new predator. People locked their doors. Parents drove their kids to school. The community felt a pulse of dread, a sense that something had slipped under the skin of the town and settled there, watching. Detectives worked through the usual suspects, family, friends, ex-boyfriends, co-workers, but nothing made sense. No fights, no threats, no one lurking around the diner, no unexplained phone calls, no secret life. It was as if she'd been plucked out of the world by something that left no fingerprints. Her best friend, Lily, insisted Rachel mentioned a strange car following her earlier that week. A rust-brown pickup with a missing taillight, but without a plate number, without a witness. It became just another shadow in the stack of dead ends. Deputies combed the woods, the beaches, the ravines. They brought in search dogs, helicopters, volunteers. They found nothing but footprints. Dozens of them. From rescuers, hikers, tourists. Muddy impressions overlapping until no one knew which belonged to whom. Days turned into weeks. The news cycle shifted. Interest faded. The forest held its silence, stubborn and ancient, as if protecting whatever secret it had taken that night. And through it all, the car sat in the evidence yard like a ghost. Mechanics inspected it. No tampering, no forced entry. The keys were still in the ignition. The gas tank was half full. The seat adjusted for Rachel's height. It was as if she'd simply stepped out, taken a breath, and evaporated into the coastal wind. But every case leaves a residue, and this one left whispers. Strange accounts locals weren't sure they believed themselves. A trucker who claimed he saw a figure standing in the middle of the road around the time Rachel vanished, wearing something white. A camper who heard a woman's voice crying across the ravine but dismissed it as the ocean echoing through the rocks. A convenience store clerk who swore a man bought a flashlight and rope that same night, shaking so hard she thought he was sick. None of it fit neatly, none of it matched, and all of it dissolved under scrutiny. Winter came. Rain carved fresh scars into the cliffs, washing away whatever evidence the earth had once held. By the time spring thawed the coastline, the case file had thickened with statements, maps, photographs, theories, yet nothing pointed anywhere. Rachel Arden had vanished without leaving anything behind except the echo of an unfinished life. Her family never stopped searching, though. Irene walked the highway every Sunday, leaving flowers where the car was found. Her father built a small wooden cross near the guardrail, though he insisted it wasn't a memorial. Not until we know, he'd say, voice breaking on the last word. Her brother, Chase, grew up in the shadow of the mystery, graduating high school with reporters still occasionally calling the house, hoping for updates that never came. By the mid-'80s, the case was officially classified as cold. The box containing her belongings, the purse, the denim jacket, the single sneaker, was pushed to a back shelf in the evidence vault. The label on the file faded. Officers retired, witnesses moved away, and the town moved on, or tried to, though every few years, whenever someone went missing on the coast, people would look at the cliffs and mutter just like 79. The phrase became a shorthand for the unsolved, the unspoken, the unease that never let go. Then, decades later, the story returned with a vengeance, triggered by something no one expected. But that moment belonged far in the future, in 2024, when a discovery would erupt like a long-buried fault line snapping open. For now, the story remains trapped in the late 1970s, breathing through static-filled police radios, through missing posters taped to telephone poles, through the trembling voice of a mother begging for answers. For now, the last known moments of Rachel Arden linger like an unfinished broadcast. Headlights on, door open, coastal wind tearing through the trees. A cold case in the making. A cliffside waiting to surrender its truth. A town learning how silence becomes a monster when it's allowed to grow for too long. And somewhere out there, perhaps in the dark woods, perhaps in the crashing waves, perhaps in the memory of someone who never came forward, lies the question that still haunts California. What happened at mile marker 47 on that October night? A question sharp enough to cut through time, lingering like a warning. A question the community wasn't ready to face then, and still flinches from now. Years later, when people tried to explain how the case slipped through their fingers, they always went back to those first chaotic weeks after Rachel vanished, when fear moved faster than facts and the town drowned itself in theories. For a while, it felt like everyone had a suspect: the stranger at the gas station, the ex-logger who lived in a trailer near the cliffs, the drifter who played guitar outside the grocery store. Matt Tick B. On, the local paper called it in a tiny side column, but inside the town, the words were louder, uglier. Did you hear? They say it was someone from here. And in small communities like this, suspicion doesn't need proof. It just needs a name. Detectives chased leads until they blurred together. One tip sent them to a run-down cabin deep in the woods where they found nothing but empty beer bottles and a calendar still stuck on 1977. Another tip claimed Rachel had been seen at a bus station 2 towns over, arguing with an older man. Security cameras were rare back then, unreliable when they existed at all. By the time officers arrived, the shift had changed, the memory faded, the story softened into a shrug. Someone thought they remembered her. Someone thought they didn't. A grainy world before high-resolution answers. The town's only diner became an unofficial command center. Locals clustered into red vinyl booths, trading updates, rumors, half-truths. Irene sat by the window most afternoons, hands wrapped around a coffee she never drank, watching the highway as if Rachel might simply appear, walking in, cheeks flushed from the cold, apologizing for being late. Regulars didn't know what to say. They brought pies, casseroles, envelopes of cash folded into handshakes. The kind of kindness that arrives when a community thinks tragedy has an endpoint. When they still believe, deep down, that there will be a resolution, an arrest, a trial, a headline that says, "Suspect in 1979, disappearance finally caught." No one was ready to accept a cold case just yet. At the sheriff's office, a conference room wall slowly transformed into a mosaic of desperation. Maps pinned with colored tacks, a timeline stretched in black marker, dates and scribbled notes crowding each other, photos of Rachel, school portrait, diner uniform, candid shot at the beach with hair whipped by wind. Underneath, a single word underlined, why? The question kept deputies awake at night. It made them snap at their families, drink too much coffee, reread the same statements until the words lost their meaning. One deputy in particular couldn't let it go. His name was Tom Klein, 32, former military police, the kind of man who carried tension in his shoulders and rarely smiled without effort. Rachel's case became his obsession, though he never called it that. He called it unfinished business. He rewalked the scene more times than he could count, standing at mile marker 47 in the dead of night, listening to the ocean roar below, forcing himself to imagine what had happened in the minutes between the engine shutting off and the silence that followed. He talked to truckers, to runaway teens, to loners who slept in their cars along the coast. He sent soil samples to the state lab, asked for trace analysis they weren't equipped to do, pushed for forensic technology that, in 1979, still felt like science fiction. Most of his efforts hit the same wall. Lack of funding, lack of equipment, lack of anything concrete to hold. The best he got was a partial footprint in the dirt near the Pontiac, too smudged to match, too generic to mean anything. Not Rachel's size. Male, probably. That was all. Every dead end left another mark on him. His colleagues joked that he had the cold case curse, that if he kept staring at those files, he'd turn to ice himself. But when he visited the Arden house, when he saw Rachel's room still frozen in time, bed neatly made, posters curling off the wall, a yearbook lying open, he knew this wasn't just a job. He saw the way Irene stared at the door, heard the way her father's voice cracked on the phrase, "if she comes back," and felt something inside him lock onto the case with a grip that wouldn't loosen. Small towns don't stay patient forever. After a year, people started looking for someone to blame. Some said the sheriff's department hadn't done enough. Others whispered that maybe the family knew more than they were saying. Anonymous letters arrived at the station accusing strangers by name, claiming secret knowledge, then evaporating under examination. One tip alleged that Rachel had been pregnant and wanted to disappear. Another insisted she'd been caught up in something bigger, drug trafficking, cult activity, a ring of predators using the highway as a hunting ground. Each theory spawned a new thread, each thread unraveled in Tom's hands. Time passed like erosion. 1980, 1981, new crimes, new emergencies. The urgency around mile marker 47 faded into a dull ache. The corkboard in the conference room was cleared for fresher tragedies. Rachel's file moved from the active investigations drawer to a box labeled unsolved. Cold case. 2 words that sounded clinical on paper, but in the Arden household, they felt like a verdict. On the 5th anniversary of her disappearance, the local paper finally gave the case its first real front-page headline. 1979, cold case still haunts coastal town. The article was full of familiar phrases, no leads, no suspects, no closure. It quoted Irene saying, "Someone knows. Someone out there knows." It quoted Tom saying, "This case is not closed. It never will be, not to me." But beneath the strong words lay a quiet truth. No one knew what else to do. Technology marched forward without them. Fingerprint databases expanded. DNA science crept into the news, first as a curiosity, then as a revolution. Big city detectives began to reopen old files with fresh tools, getting headlines like, "Decades-old murder solved with new DNA match." Each one hit Tom like a jolt. If he'd had those methods in 1979, he thought maybe they wouldn't be here now, still staring into the dark. He tried, though. Late nights, when the station was quiet, he would unlock the evidence room, pull down the aging cardboard box with Rachel's name in faded ink, and handle each piece as if it might suddenly speak. The jacket, the purse, the sneaker, the photographs of the car. He sent what he could to state labs in the early 90s, when DNA profiling finally became accessible enough to attempt. The answer came back the way so many answers did in his line of work. Inconclusive, not enough material, too degraded, no usable profile. The case stayed where it was, suspended, half frozen, half burning. Outside the station, life barreled on. Kids who had pasted missing posters on their school lockers grew up, left for college, came back only on holidays. A new generation heard about Rachel from their parents as a kind of ghost story. "Don't drive that stretch of road alone at night," they'd say. "Remember what happened in '79. Teenagers turned it into a dare, a test of courage. Park your car at mile marker 47 with your lights off and wait. Some claimed to hear footsteps in the gravel. Some swore they saw a girl walking along the guardrail in their rearview mirror. The story mutated, twisted, became myth. But for the Arden family, it never became myth. It stayed sharp, real, heavy. Irene aged faster than she should have, lines settling into her face like permanent frowns. Her hair turned gray at the temples first, the same spots her daughter used to kiss when she was little. Her husband retreated into his workshop, carving birdhouses, picture frames, anything to keep his hands from being still. Chase, who had been a boy when the police first came to the door, grew into a quiet, watchful man, the kind who measured everyone by what they didn't say. Every few years, a new detective would be assigned to review the file, a bureaucratic gesture more than a real attempt. They'd skim the notes, trace the timeline, nod at Tom's obsessive annotations. They'd ask him, out of habit, what he thought really happened. He always gave the same answer. "I think someone stopped," he'd say, pointing at the photo of the car, door ajar, blackness yawning beyond. Someone she didn't see as a threat, a familiar face, or the kind of stranger who knows how to look harmless. "And after that," they'd ask. "After that," Tom would say, voice low, "we lose her to the dark." Years thickened around the case like sediment. Officers retired. New ones took their place, their uniforms crisp, their eyes unclouded by ghosts. Rachel's photograph migrated to a different wall now, a smaller one near the break room alongside other unsolved faces, a silent gallery of questions. Sometimes the young recruits would stop, stare, and ask, "What's her story?" The older deputies would answer with a sigh and a shorthand phrase that carried decades of weight. Highway 79, cold case. By the time 2000 arrived, the town had changed. The diner had new owners. Tourists stopped more often, drawn by travel blogs and guidebooks that called the cliffs breathtaking and the highway scenic. They took photos where the Pontiac had once sat, smiling with the ocean behind them, unaware that the gravel beneath their feet had once been circled with police tape. A few locals still remembered, though. They didn't take pictures there. In the background, something else was changing, quietly, almost imperceptibly. State databases grew. Old evidence, long thought useless, suddenly had potential value. Cold case units in bigger cities started reopening boxes that looked just like Rachel's, pulling miracles out of dusty envelopes. 30-year-old murder solved became less of a rarity and more of a pattern. The idea of closure after decades stopped sounding like fiction and started sounding like a possibility, distant but real. Somewhere in that shifting landscape, the California 1979 cold case began to stir again, not because someone remembered, but because a machine did. Because a name in one file brushed up against a number in another, because a partial print, a tiny smudge in the dirt outside a teenager's abandoned car, refused to stay silent forever. It started with a backlog, not a revelation, not a confession, not a dramatic tip phoned in at midnight. Just a room full of boxes in a state building 200 miles away, stacked floor to ceiling, each one stamped with the same word that had haunted the Arden family for decades: unsolved. A new task force was created in the early 2000s, a kind of triage unit for forgotten tragedies. Their mission sounded simple on paper: pull old evidence, test it with new science, see what speaks. Cold Case Initiative, the press releases called it. Justice delayed but not denied. In reality, it was a slow, grinding resurrection of ghosts. Rachel's box arrived there almost by accident, lumped into a shipment from the coastal county that had long since shifted priorities. It wasn't the only one. There were files on missing hitchhikers, motel room murders, a body found in a burned-out car. But something about the 1979 highway disappearance caught the eye of a young analyst named Nina Morales. Fresh out of grad school, precise handwriting, sharp eyes, the kind of person who saw patterns in chaos. She read the summary and stopped on one phrase: partial print, unidentified male, recovered near driver's door. Her pen tapped the page. Partial, smudged, useless in 1979. Not so useless now. She dug deeper, photographs of the scene, old lab reports, a plastic evidence envelope containing a lifted latent print on a yellowed backing card, the ridges faint but visible. Someone decades ago had taken the time to dust the dirt-smudged doorframe and preserve whatever they could. It wasn't enough to identify anyone then. It might be now. California 1979 cold case, Nina wrote at the top of her notes, circling it. Her generation had grown up hearing about DNA miracles, but she knew fingerprints could be just as loud when given the right audience. Automated systems, national databases, millions of prints from millions of people, all waiting for a match that might never come or might snap into place with a single scan. The process wasn't glamorous, no dramatic music, no breathless countdown, just a series of steps carried out under fluorescent light. She requested permission to rescan the latent print, ran it through high-resolution imaging, cleaned the digital file as best she could. Every ridge mattered. Every curve could be the difference between no hit and possible match. When she finally submitted it to AFIS, the automated fingerprint identification system, she didn't expect fireworks. She expected another shrug from the machine. But the machine blinked. Minutes later, her screen lit up with a list of candidates. 10, then 5, then 3. The software ranked them by probability, percentages ticking up and down like a heartbeat. One name rose to the top, hovering there. A man with a record. A man whose fingerprints had been taken years after Rachel vanished. A man who, according to the system, had once left a partial echo of himself on the frame of her car. Nina stared at the name. Clayton Ward, arrested in the late 80s for burglary, again in the 90s for an assault in a bar parking lot, a string of minor charges, nothing that grabbed headlines, nothing that screamed coastal highway predator. But his file contained something else that made her pulse quicken. A listed address from 1979, barely 30 minutes from mile marker 47. She called her supervisor, they called the county, the words spread along phone lines and encrypted emails carrying the same electric phrase over and over. Possible hit on California 1979 cold case. For most people in the town, that year had settled into dust. For the few who still remembered, it was as if time folded in on itself and deposited them back on that cliffside road under those cold headlights. The sheriff's office, where Tom Klein had spent his career, looked different now. New computers, new paint, new faces. Tom himself was retired, his old desk taken by someone who didn't yet know how much history had passed through it. When the call came in about the fingerprint match, the current sheriff paused, glanced at the framed photographs on the wall outside his office. Retired deputies, past sheriffs, men and women who had carried the badge through quieter times and stormier ones. Tom's weathered face looked back at him from one of those frames, eyes still stubborn even in black and white. "We should tell him," the sheriff said quietly. The knock on Tom's door came on a Tuesday afternoon. His house smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee, the remnants of a life built around small projects and long-avoided rest. He opened the door expecting a delivery, maybe a neighbor. Instead, he saw two deputies, both younger than the case itself, hats in hand, faces serious. "Mr. Klein," one of them said, "we've had a development. It's about the Arden case." For a moment, the world shrank to the sound of that name. Arden, a word that had become synonymous with failure in Tom's mind, something he carried like a scar under his shirt. He stepped aside without asking questions, letting them in, his chest tight. They sat at his kitchen table, where old notebooks were still stacked like relics, notes about a case he hadn't been officially assigned to in years but never truly left. The deputies explained. The cold case task force, the latent print, the AFIS hit, the name, Clayton Ward. Tom listened, expression unreadable, thumb tracing the edge of his mug. It wasn't joy he felt. It wasn't victory. It was something rougher, more dangerous. The first flicker of possibility after a lifetime of almosts. "Ward," he repeated, tasting the name, searching his memory like a dark room. "I don't remember him in the original files." "He wasn't," one deputy said. "He didn't pop until the late 80s. No record before that." "Address near the highway, though," the other added, sliding a printed sheet across the table. "Lived here in 79. Worked odd jobs, moved around. No solid alibi in the window of the disappearance, at least none we can find." Tom looked at the address and felt a slow, cold anger rise. All those nights on the cliff, all those interviews, all those faces. And somewhere out there, a man whose fingertips had brushed the metal of a frightened girl's car had slipped right past him. Because there had been no way to know back then. Because the science had been deaf. "What do you want from me?" Tom asked finally. "We're reopening the case," the deputy said. "Officially. The DA wants to see if there's enough to move forward. We thought you might help us walk through it. No one knows this file better than you." There it was. The door he thought had closed forever, cracked open again. He could have said no. He could have claimed he was too old, too tired, too finished with ghosts. Instead, he went to the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled down a box that looked almost identical to the one in the state archives. His own personal version, filled with photocopies, scribbled timelines, half-forgotten theories. He set it on the table. "Then we start here," he said, "and we don't leave anything behind this time." Word traveled through the town like it always did, quietly at first, then faster. "They're reopening the Arden case," someone whispered at the grocery store. "New evidence," another said at the bar, leaning in. "Fingerprint. They've got a name." The community reacted the way communities do when an old fear is resurrected. Some were hopeful, some were skeptical, some were angry that it had taken this long, and some, the ones who had built new lives on top of old wounds, simply didn't want to talk about it. One person who never stopped talking about it was Chase Arden. He was middle-aged now, his hair thinning, lines carving his face in ways that made him look older than his years. He answered the sheriff's call on the first ring. "Chase, it's about your sister," the sheriff said. "We may have a break." There was a silence on the line that felt like a held breath. Chase had rehearsed this moment in his head 1,000 times, always imagining it would come out of nowhere, a clipped sentence on a voicemail, a knock during dinner. When it finally arrived, it felt both unreal and inevitable. "What kind of break?" he asked. "Fingerprint hit. We're working with the state. We're hoping you'll come down, talk with us, review some things. This isn't a promise, Chase. It's not over, but it's movement." Movement. A word that tasted like relief and terror at the same time. He agreed, of course. There was never a world in which he didn't. As he hung up, he glanced at the small wooden cross on his mantelpiece, the one his father had built and later brought home when the county replaced it with a metal sign for safety reasons. It was the last physical piece of the cliffside vigil, now standing in a room that had seen birthdays, holidays, arguments, and uneasy sleep. "Cold case solved," he whispered to no one. "Or just another false start?" At the state lab, Nina watched the ripples of her discovery spread outward. For her, it had started as data. A print that matched another print, lines and loops aligning with mathematical certainty. Now it was a family, a town, a retired detective reopening old boxes and old wounds. She knew better than to call it solved. Fingerprints could connect a person to a place. They couldn't, on their own, explain why. Investigators began reconstructing Clayton Ward's life in 1979 like a crime scene stretched over decades. Where he worked, who he knew, what car he drove, whether he'd crossed paths with a 17-year-old girl from a coastal town, at the diner, at the gas station, at the grocery store. Witnesses from that era were harder to find now. Some had moved away, some had died, some remembered faces but not names, names but not dates. Memories had eroded like the cliffs. Yet patterns emerged. Ward had done construction work along the highway that year. He'd often driven late at night, according to a former coworker. He'd hung out at a bar not far from the diner where Rachel worked, though no one could say for sure if they'd ever spoken. He wasn't a ghost. He was a man who'd been there, living his life in the background of a headline. "Why didn't his name come up back then?" one young detective asked, flipping through an old roster of interviewees. "Because we were human," Tom answered quietly, standing beside him. "Because the world was smaller and harder at the same time. Because sometimes the monster doesn't look like a monster when you pass him on the street." They traced Ward's trail forward in time. After the 80s arrests, he'd drifted, moving through different towns, switching jobs, sometimes staying clean, sometimes slipping. He was never convicted of anything that would mark him as a killer. No bodies in his wake, at least none that had his name attached. A long, gray life of low-level crime and low-level existence. The question loomed over every page, every photo. Was this their man, or was the fingerprint a coincidence, an innocent touch on a car that had briefly pulled over, a brush with tragedy that didn't belong to him? Partial print. Probable match. Not a confession, not a smoking gun, not yet. The DA's office wanted more. A good prosecutor knew better than to walk into court with a single old latent. They needed corroboration, a pattern, a story that could hold up under cross-examination. That's when someone at the state task force suggested something that made everyone pause. If Ward was involved in 1979, they said, what are the chances that was his only serious crime? In other words, what if Rachel's case was just one headline in a series that had never been connected? What if the cold wind that swept her off the map had brushed others in other towns on other nights, leaving behind pieces no one ever put together? The team started looking outward, beyond the cliffs, beyond the county, beyond the year. Missing women, abandoned cars. Matt Tick BN and no leads, stamped in ink across old reports. They fed Ward's name into databases, cross-checked his known locations against unsolved cases. It was like dragging a net through dark water, waiting to see what surfaced. Something did. Not an answer, not yet. But a pattern that made the hair rise on the back of the necks of everyone who saw it, a string of disappearances stretching up and down the coast over several years, each one close enough to where Ward had been, each one with just enough similarity to whisper the same chilling phrase. What if 79 wasn't an isolated nightmare? And suddenly, the California 1979 cold case stopped being just a local wound. It started to look like the entry point to something larger, older, and far more dangerous than anyone had dared imagine. They started with maps, printed, taped together, spread across a long table like a body waiting to be examined. The California coastline stretched in faded pastels, dotted with pins that marked the known and the unknown. Towns, rest stops, truck stops, spots where someone had vanished without enough noise to make national news. Each pin came with a file. Each file carried a headline, or at least the bones of one. Young woman disappears after shift at Seaside Bar. Backpacker last seen near highway pullout. Car found abandoned, driver missing, foul play suspected. Different years, different counties, different investigators who'd done what they could with what they had, then moved on when nothing gave way. The name Ward appeared again and again, not as a bold red flag, but as a faint watermark in the background of other stories. A time card from a construction site near a missing person's last known location, a paycheck stub in a neighboring town, a rental agreement for a room above a garage 2 streets over from a convenience store where a girl was last seen alive. On their own, each connection meant nothing. Together they formed a thin chain running up the coast, looping back, hovering near pain without quite touching it. It was Nina who saw it first, leaning over the maps in the cold case unit's war room, the fluorescent lights above her buzzing like impatient insects. "Look here," she said, tracing Ward's documented addresses with a pen. "He keeps orbiting the same corridors, highways, coastal routes, short-term work, short-term stays, always just passing through, always close enough to read the headlines, but never close enough to be named in them." As Tom studied the spread, his eyes dark, his finger resting on mile marker 47 like it might burn him. "If this is real," he said slowly, "then Rachel wasn't just unlucky, she was part of a hunt we didn't know we were watching." The room went quiet. No one wanted to be the first to say the word out loud, but it hovered there anyway. Serial. The kind of label that turned old files into potential episodes of a larger, more terrifying story. To the outside world, it still looked like a single case being revisited. The sheriff's office was careful with what it released. One press conference, a short statement. New forensic development in 1979 disappearance. They mentioned a potential suspect but didn't give a name. They mentioned collaboration with state and federal partners. They did not mention the other pins on the map. They did not mention the pattern or the possibility that the coastal road so many tourists called scenic had for a time been a silent hunting ground. The town reacted like it always did, with a mix of hope, anger, and exhaustion. Some people said, "Finally." Others said, "We'll believe it when someone's in cuffs." A few said nothing at all because they'd lost someone too, in a different year under different circumstances, and they didn't like the way the old fear felt when it crawled back up their spines. For Chase, it wasn't a headline. It was the reopening of a wound that had never healed right. He sat in the sheriff's office across from Tom and the new investigators, the old case file open on the table between them. Rachel's photograph lay on top, that same school portrait he'd grown up seeing in hallways and wallet slots on the mantelpiece, a frozen version of his sister that never aged while he did. "We're going to ask you some things we've asked before," one detective said gently. "We know it's hard, but details matter." "I've been replaying details my whole life," Chase answered, voice tight. "Ask." They went through it all again. Where Rachel worked, who she knew, whether she'd ever mentioned a man in a rust-colored pickup, a construction worker, anyone who made her uneasy. Chase remembered fragments, her joking about creeps who left too big a tip and too long a stare, her rolling her eyes about older men who thought a coffee counter was an invitation. Nothing that pointed to a specific face, nothing that sounded like the beginning of a murder story. Just the everyday background noise of danger women learned to tuck away. "What about the week before she disappeared?" Tom asked quietly. "Anything different? Anything at all?" Chase hesitated, frowning, as if reaching into a dusty drawer that never quite emptied. "She came home late one night," he said slowly. "Not the night she disappeared, a few days before. She was kind of jumpy. I remember because I teased her, called her paranoid, asked if Bigfoot chased her. She didn't laugh. She just said there was a guy in the parking lot." "What guy?" another detective pressed. "She didn't say, just said he stared too long, asked weird questions. I told her to have one of the cooks walk her to the car next time. She said she could handle herself." His throat tightened. "I didn't push. I should have pushed." Tom's jaw clenched. He remembered that detail, buried in an old statement, written down in clumsy teenage wording. A weird guy in the lot. Back then, weird guys in lots were everywhere. They'd asked around, pulled faces out of thin air, and nothing stuck. Now, in light of the fingerprint, the pattern, the pins on the map, the weird guy suddenly looked less like a ghost and more like a shadow with a possible name. They put together a photo array, old pictures dug from DMV records, arrest files, employment documents. Ward in his 20s stared out at them with flat eyes, a jawline that hadn't yet softened, a haircut that dated the photo more than the timestamp did. They added other men from the era, similar builds, similar hair, a lineup of potential pasts. "Do you think your mother could look at these?" the detective asked. Chase shook his head, not in refusal, but in pain. "She's not the same," he said. "She remembers, but not like she used to. Some days she thinks Rachel is still 17 and just late for curfew. Some days she knows. Asking her to relive it now might kill her faster." They didn't push. Some answers came with too high a cost. They asked Chase instead to look, knowing full well that memory after so many years was unreliable, but hoping for anything, any flicker. He stared at the grid of faces, his finger hovering over one, then another, then stopping, uncertain. "I don't know," he said finally, voice barely audible. They all looked like the kind of men she'd complain about. They all looked like strangers lingering too long. Tom didn't blame him. In his own mind, the suspect had become a composite. Every unremarkable man who'd ever stopped at the diner, every pickup that had ever idled too long at a red light. Reality, he knew, was rarely as cinematic as the stories made it. Monsters wore ordinary clothes. They paid rent. They picked up groceries. They answered questions with shrugs. They blended. While the town wrestled with the past, the state task force kept working the present. Nina cross-referenced Ward's known movements with unsolved cases in other states, casting a wider net. An investigator from Oregon called with a file from 1981, another abandoned car near a coastal overlook, another young woman who vanished without a trace. The details didn't line up perfectly, but they didn't have to. Patterns were never clean. They just had to be consistent enough to raise the hair on the back of your neck. In a cramped office 3 states away, a retired detective watched a news clip about the reopened California cold case and felt his stomach drop. He'd worked a disappearance in '82, a hitchhiker last seen getting into a pickup with a man who seemed nice enough, according to the friend who survived. The case had gone nowhere. The description of the truck back then had been maddeningly generic, rust-colored, older model, missing a taillight. He picked up the phone. 1 call turned into 3. The cold case initiative was suddenly less about a single highway and more about a corridor of unease that stretched across years and jurisdictions. The phrase possible linked offender started appearing in interagency emails, followed by disclaimers about the age of evidence, the fragility of witness memory, the need for caution. No one wanted to leap to the wrong conclusion. No one wanted to miss the right one. In the middle of this storm, one question kept circling back to the same point. Where was Clayton Ward now? They found him in a small town inland, living in a rented room over a closed-down hardware store, surviving on disability checks and odd repair jobs. Age had done its work. His hair was thinner, his shoulders rounded, his record quiet for the last several years. No new charges, no fresh fingerprints. On paper, he looked like a man life had worn down, not a hunter who once roamed the coastline. On paper, he looked forgettable. The decision to approach him was careful, methodical. They needed to do it right. They needed control. No leaked names, no premature headlines screaming California 1979 cold case suspect confronted. They wanted Ward unaware of the storm building around his name, at least long enough to see what he did when the past knocked on his door. Tom wasn't supposed to be there. Retired status, liability, policy. But the sheriff knew how much of his life was buried in that file, and in the end, they didn't have to technically bend the rules. Tom came along as a consultant, his presence unofficial but impossible to deny. As they drove, he watched the landscape blur past, the same scrubland and scattered houses that had once framed other drives to other suspects. Only this time, the distance between 1979 and now sat in the passenger seat with him, heavy and silent. They found Ward outside, fixing a loose step on the building's front porch, hammer in hand, sleeves rolled up, an old radio playing low from inside an open window. He didn't look surprised when the unmarked car pulled up. Law enforcement had been a recurring character in his life, though never quite like this. "Clayton Ward?" one detective asked. Ward straightened, wincing slightly as his back protested. "Depends who's asking." "State investigators, we'd like to talk with you about some things from a long time ago." He squinted at them, eyes narrowed against the sun. "I haven't done anything lately." "We're not here about lately," the detective said. "We're here about 1979. There it was. That year again, dropped like a stone into the quiet air. For a fraction of a second, something flashed across Ward's face. Not panic, not exactly, more like recognition. A flicker of film burned for a single frame, then gone. "Been a lot of years since then," he said carefully. "You'll have to be more specific." "We will," the detective said. "But we'd rather do it somewhere private." They brought him to the local station, a small building that smelled of coffee and dust, the interrogation room generic and windowless, the kind of place where lives tilted without the outside world ever noticing. Cameras rolled, audio recorded, a table, 3 chairs, a pitcher of water sweating onto a thin paper napkin. Ward sat, arms loose but his jaw tight, eyes bouncing between the detectives and Tom, who watched from the corner with the stillness of someone who had waited for this moment longer than anyone else in the room. "We're looking at an unsolved disappearance," the lead detective began. "Girl went missing off a coastal highway in California, 1979. You ever spend time up that way? Ward shrugged. I worked a lot of places. Can't remember every town. Long time ago. The detective slid a photo across the table. Not of Rachel, not yet, but of the blue Pontiac at mile marker 47, door open, headlights cutting into the dark. The black and white print flattened the scene, drained it of color, but not of weight. You recognize this car? The detective asked. Ward stared at the photo, expression unreadable. No, should I? Your fingerprint was found on it, the detective said, voice calm but precise. Back then, the technology wasn't strong enough to match it. It is now. That's how we found you. Silence thickened in the room. Outside, a phone rang somewhere, muffled. Inside, the only sound was Ward's breath, slow and deliberate, as if he was choosing each inhale and exhale. His eyes flicked to Tom in the corner. And who's he? Ward asked. Someone who's been waiting a long time, Tom said, stepping forward at last. I'm the one who stood on that highway looking at that car while a 17-year-old girl's family waited for her to come home. Ward's gaze lingered on him, weighing something. Then he looked back down at the photograph, one fingertip hovering just above the printed metal frame, careful not to touch. A lot of people touched a lot of cars back then, he said slowly. You're going to have to do better than dust and guesses if you want to put anything on me. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't an admission. It was something in between, something slick, something practiced. A man who had learned, over decades, how to live near the edge of trouble without falling all the way in. In that small room, one thing became clear. Whatever truth 1979 held, it wasn't going to surrender itself easily. Not to science, not to memory, not to the desperate need for a headline that finally read, California 1979, cold case solved, decades of silence shattered. The room didn't move, but the air did. It tightened as if someone had pulled a cord around the edges, cinching everything inward. On the recording, you can hear the faint creak of a chair as Clayton Ward settles back, the soft thud of Tom's shoe against the floor, the quiet drip of water from a sweating pitcher, a frozen triangle, two men who've spent their lives chasing ghosts, and one man who might be one. The lead detective didn't blink. We're past guesses, Mr. Ward. Your fingerprint on a vehicle found at a crime scene is more than a guess. Ward's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. Crime scene, he repeated, rolling the words slowly. That what we're calling it? I heard it was a missing person. Maybe she just ran. People run, especially kids. Kids don't leave their cars running with their purse and keys inside, the detective said. They don't abandon a highway at night and never come back. And they don't usually get touched by men who say they've never been there. He slid another photograph forward, this time of Rachel herself, that same school picture everyone in town knew too well. Perfect lighting, careful smile, eyes that still looked alive because the camera didn't know what the highway had planned. You recognize her? He asked. Ward looked at the picture for a long moment, too long, not long enough, the kind of pause that would get replayed in court, slowed down, analyzed in true crime documentaries. Then he shrugged. Pretty. Lots of girls looked like that back then. Feathered hair, big eyes. I served coffee to 100 of them, fixed cars for 100 more. You put that picture in front of me 40 years ago, maybe I'd know. Not now. You worked near that town in '79, the detective reminded him. Construction site up the road. You drank at the bar where she and her coworkers sometimes stopped after shifts. You drove that highway. Are you telling us you never saw this girl? I'm telling you, memories aren't as clean as you want them to be, Ward said. You can drag me back to every town I ever worked in and wave faces at me. I'm not going to suddenly remember someone just because you need me to. Tom's voice came in low, steady, cutting through the back and forth like a scalpel. You don't remember her, he said, but your hand remembers her car. Ward finally looked straight at him again, really looked. There was a flicker there, a flash of irritation, or calculation, or something darker. It passed so quickly the camera almost missed it. You ever hitchhike, officer? Ward asked. Detective, Tom corrected. Retired. Detective, Ward echoed. You ever pull over for someone on the side of the road, maybe lean on their car to ask if they're okay, maybe touch the door when you're trying to help? The detective at the table shifted. Is that what you're saying happened? Ward shrugged again, a slow roll of his shoulders. You're the ones writing the story. I'm just giving you options. Maybe I stopped. Maybe someone's hood was up. Maybe she was scared and I said I'd call it in. Maybe I touched the car. Maybe I didn't. 40 years is a long time to hang a man on maybe. He was good. That was the worst part. Not brilliant, not cinematic, not a mastermind. Just experienced. A man who had spent a lifetime slipping in and out of trouble, learning how much to say and how much to leave unsaid. A man who understood that doubt was his best attorney. The interview went on, questions sharpened. Answers stayed blunt, sanded down to nothing that could cut either way. Where were you that night? Working late? With who? Guys whose names he claimed not to remember. Anyone verify that? Not after 4 decades. Did you ever drive a rust-colored pickup with a missing taillight? Might have. Trucks come and go. Parts break. The past blurred on his tongue whenever they tried to nail it to a date or a place. Outside the room, behind a thin wall, Nina watched the feed on a small monitor. She'd seen enough interrogations to know this one was walking the knife edge between promising and infuriating. The fingerprint had been a lightning strike, a rare moment when science reached backward and pulled something tangible out of the dark. But lightning didn't convict people. Juries did. And juries needed more than partials and bad vibes. "He's not giving you anything," she said quietly when the detective stepped out for a brief break, rubbing his eyes. "He's giving us something," Tom answered, though his voice betrayed how little he believed it. Guilt doesn't always sound like a confession. Sometimes it sounds like a man who's rehearsed all the ways to stand near a grave and swear he never dug it. Back in the room, the detective tried a different angle. "Here's the thing, Clayton," he said. "We're not just looking at California. We're looking at Oregon, maybe Washington, other disappearances, other cars, other nights. You keep showing up around missing women like a bad headline that never makes print. That's not nothing." Ward chuckled once, a dry, joyless sound. "You people," he said. "You watch too many shows. Every drifter becomes a possible serial. Every man who's had a few bad years becomes a monster in a montage. You want me to be your cold case boogeyman so you can sleep better at night. Tell yourselves you found the devil. I'm just a guy with a bad back and a worse resume." "Then why does your past keep pointing at our dead ends?" the detective asked. "You're the ones drawing the lines," Ward shot back. "You can make any map look like a pattern if you pin hard enough." They let him talk. They recorded every word. When the interview finally ended, no confession, no breakdown, no sudden tearful apology for the highway, Ward was escorted to a holding cell while the DA's office weighed the options like loaded dice. Charge him now, and they risked losing the entire case on reasonable doubt. Wait, and they risked losing him. Time eroding witnesses, health eroding his body, death cutting the conversation short forever. Cold case solved needed more than a single matching ridge on a print card and a man who wouldn't say no. Search warrants were the next step. Not just for his current room, but for the past he'd left behind. Old storage units. Former addresses that still existed, yards he'd once rented, houses where his name had appeared on leases 30, 40 years earlier. Evidence had a way of lingering in places humans had abandoned. A box in an attic, a buried tool, a shirt forgotten behind a wall panel. Teams fanned out. In the small town where Ward now lived, they went through every inch of his space. The room above the shuttered hardware store was sparse. Bed, table, small TV, a closet mostly filled with thrift store shirts and work boots worn down at the soles. One box under the bed held old papers, tax forms, letters, a faded photograph of a younger Ward standing next to a truck that didn't exist anymore, rust blooming across the bumper like a bruise. In another county, an elderly landlord stood on a porch and squinted at a warrant with unsteady hands. "Clay," he said. "Yeah, he rented the back unit for a while. Quiet, paid in cash. Left in a hurry when work dried up. The unit was empty now, but the crawl space beneath it wasn't." Investigators slid into the dust and cobwebs, their flashlight beams catching on decades of debris. Soda cans, bottles, a cracked toolbox, a crumpled cigarette pack, no trophies, no obvious horror movie clues, just the messy residue of transience. The biggest find came from a storage facility off a frontage road where the clerk at the desk flipped through a ledger and frowned. "That name's familiar," she said. "Unit's been paid on automatic draft for years. No one ever comes by. Some people just forget they even own half the stuff they're storing." The lock was cut. The metal door rolled up with a groan. Inside, dust danced in the sunlight, slicing through the narrow gap, settling over cardboard boxes, plastic crates, an old mattress, a duffel bag slumped in the corner like a sleeping animal. Crime scene techs moved carefully, cataloging everything they touched. Most of it was junk. Tools, work clothes, old calendars, boxes of receipts, a coffee can full of screws. But in one cracked plastic tote, beneath a layer of tangled extension cords, they found something that made the room go still. It was a small jewelry box, the kind sold at cheap department stores. Faux wood, tarnished hinge, velvet interior worn thin. Inside were 3 items: a silver ring, a thin gold chain, and a simple, heart-shaped pendant with a tiny chip on one edge. Tom didn't recognize it at first. Then someone pulled up a copy of a 1979 property report. an inventory list of items reported in Rachel's possession at the time of her disappearance. Purse, keys, wallet, lipstick, one necklace, gold, heart-shaped, initials not specified. Lots of people own those, the DA said when briefed. They sell them by the dozens. Lots of people didn't disappear on my watch, Tom replied. His voice was calm, his eyes were not. Forensics moved quickly. They photographed, swabbed, measured. The chain was old, metal worn smooth in places where fingers might have pulled at it. No DNA usable after years in dust and plastic. No engraved initials to clinch the connection. No invisible tag reading, property of Rachel Arden, to hand neatly to a jury. Just a shape, a style, a coincidence that felt too sharp to be chance. Nina stared at the pendant under the lab lights, its surface catching reflections of stainless steel and white coats. You could argue it's hers, she said. You could argue it's not. Either way, it tells a story, that he keeps things, that he holds on. Is maybe enough to look a family in the eyes and say we got him? The DA asked. That was the question no one wanted to answer. In the media, the story was already sharpening. Leaks, comments, off-the-record whispers. Possible breakthrough. Key suspect. Evidence tying man to decades-old cold case. The town felt it like a low-frequency hum. Neighbors leaned over fences, breathing the same rumors into each other's backyards. At the diner, different owners now, different staff, same counter, customers read headlines on their phones and stared at the highway visible through the streaked front windows. California, 1979, cold case solved, someone said under their breath. Don't say solved yet, the waitress replied, refilling coffee cups. She's still not home. For Chase, the developments were less about words in a headline and more about a tightness that had lived in his chest for 46 years, changing shape. He sat in his living room when the sheriff and Tom came by together, hats in hand like something out of another era. The moment the door opened, he saw it in their faces, not pure relief, not raw grief, but something complicated. Did he confess? Chase asked before they'd even stepped inside. No, Tom said. He didn't soften it. He refused to. Then what? Chase demanded. What do you have that you didn't have before, besides a name and a fingerprint and a lot of maybe? Tom told him about the storage unit, the box, the necklace, Nina's work, the pattern on the maps. He didn't promise certainty. He wouldn't insult the family with another almost packaged as victory. So you're telling me, Chase said slowly when they finished, that you might have found the man who took my sister. You might have found something that might have been hers, but you still don't know where she is. You still don't know what happened on that road. Tom swallowed. Not yet. Not yet, Chase repeated. He looked at the wooden cross on his mantle, the one that had once stood on the highway shoulder. You've been saying not yet since I was a kid. In the Arden family home, smaller now, quieter, walls lined with photographs of people mostly gone, Irene sat in an armchair by the window, a blanket over her knees. Some days she lived in 2025, some days she lived in 1970. When they told her there was new information, she nodded slowly, eyes clouded but alert. Do they know where she is? She asked. No, Mom, Chase said, kneeling beside her. Not yet, but they're trying. They're closer. She blinked, looking past him at something only she could see. She was wearing the necklace, she murmured, more to herself than to them. She loved that silly heart. Said it made her feel grown. Chase's breath caught. Do you remember what it looked like? Gold, Irene whispered. Small, just a little heart. I told her she'd lose it if she kept taking it off at the sink. She said, then you'll have to buy me another one. He didn't show her the photo from the evidence lab. He couldn't. Not yet. Not with that thin line between hope and harm vibrating so violently. At the DA's office, the debate sharpened to a razor's edge. Charge Ward with Rachel's disappearance and probable murder? Wait for more? There might not be more. They could push for a grand jury, lay out the fingerprint, the storage unit, the highway, the pattern of his life, hovering near missing women like a bad omen. But trials were unforgiving. Defense attorneys would tear into the gaps. No body, no witnesses, no confession, no direct physical link between the pendant and the victim. Jurors like clean stories, one prosecutor said. We're giving them a torn photograph. The family deserves their day in court, another argued. They deserve to sit in a room and watch someone answer for what happened, even if the verdict doesn't land where we want it. Deserve, the DA said, doesn't always line up with deliverable. Meanwhile, Ward sat in his cell, waiting. Lawyers circled, public defenders, private attorneys sniffing at a potentially high-profile case. Reporters called the sheriff's office daily, hoping the next voicemail would hand them a line they could turn into a banner. Decades-old mystery cracked. But behind the microphones, behind the press releases, the reality stayed messy, fragile, human. A girl gone without a trace, a fingerprint pulled from dust, a necklace asleep in a storage unit for years. A man whose past kept intersecting tragedy without ever definitively stepping into the center of it. The story was moving. No one could deny that. The California 1979 cold case had climbed out of its box and onto the front of newspapers, into true crime forums, across living room conversations that began with, "Do you remember that girl?" and ended with, "I heard they finally found the guy." But in the file, in the evidence room, in the hearts of the people who had lived under this shadow for nearly half a century, one stubborn, brutal fact remained untouched. Rachel Arden was still missing. And until someone could say with more than maybes where she went when she stepped out of that car, the word solved would stay what it had always been for this case. A promise everyone wanted. A headline nobody could quite write. In the weeks that followed, the case lived in a strange limbo, too loud to ignore, too fragile to push. The DA's office moved like someone carrying a glass box through a crowded room, terrified of dropping it, equally terrified of standing still. Every meeting circled the same questions. Is it enough? Will it hold? What happens to this town if we drag a man into court and walk out with nothing but reasonable doubt and a reopened wound? Outside those rooms, the world didn't wait. News vans started showing up in town, parking near the courthouse, near the old diner, near the stretch of highway that had once been just a road and had now become a symbol. Cameras framed the cliff, the guardrail, the long curve where the Pacific smashed itself against rock as if trying to erase everything that had ever happened there. California 1979 cold case, anchors said into microphones, the phrase rolling off their tongues like a brand. New suspect, new evidence, new hope, but no body, no confession, no closure. For a story about the past, it felt painfully current. One evening, after yet another meeting ended in another non-decision, Tom drove out to mile marker 47 alone. Old habit, old ritual. The asphalt glowed under the setting sun, the air tasting of salt and exhaust. The original guardrail had been replaced years ago, shinier metal, stronger bolts, but he still knew exactly where the Pontiac had sat. He could see it in his mind as clearly as if someone had projected an old photograph onto the night. He stood there, hands in his pockets, listening to the ocean roar below, feeling the wind push against his jacket. The ravine dropped away beside him, choked with brush and rocks, steeper than it looked in daylight. Back then, they'd sent men down with ropes and flashlights, crawling over every ledge, every crevice. Dogs had sniffed the air, godlike noses turned toward the damp, the decay, the secrets. They'd found nothing, or at least nothing they had recognized as a body. What if we missed her? The thought came like a whisper that had been waiting 46 years to be heard. What if she was here all along, just beyond the reach of our flashlights, buried under one more landslide, one more season of rain? The next morning, he walked into the sheriff's office with a simple request that carried the weight of a demand. "We need to search the ravine again," he said. The new sheriff blinked. "We've done this, Tom, more than once." "Not like we can now," Tom replied. "Not with what we know, not with what we've got." He wasn't wrong. Technology had moved on. Ground-penetrating radar, drones, cadaver dogs trained on scents no one in 1979 had even known how to catalog. The cost would be high, the odds low, but the fingerprint, the necklace, the suspect, everything pointed back to this stretch of road. It wasn't just a crime scene, it was a question mark burned into the landscape. The sheriff hesitated, then nodded. "We'll do it. One more time, but this is it, Tom. We can't keep tearing up the earth forever." They didn't announce the search. No press release, no cameras invited. Unmarked vehicles slipped onto the shoulder at dawn. Officers in plain clothes working alongside specialists from the state. Yellow tape went up, not as a spectacle, but as a perimeter. From a distance, it looked like highway maintenance. Up close, it looked like an excavation of long-buried grief. Cadaver dogs were the first to move, noses low, tails rigid, handlers walking behind them with leashes loose but hands ready. They worked methodically, grid by grid, their paws crunching over gravel and loose rock. Above them, a drone buzzed, its camera sending back images of the ravine, layers of stone, tangled brush, the curving path of a water runoff channel that had been carving the hillside to pieces for years. It didn't happen quickly. It never does in real life. There was no single dramatic bark, no immediate shout of, "Over here," just a shift. A dog that lingered too long in one patch of earth. A second dog brought in as confirmation, doing the same thing, circling, sniffing, sitting down with a deliberate heaviness that made everyone's pulse jump. They marked the area, small in the scope of the ravine, but massive in the scope of what it might mean. Ground-penetrating radar followed, sending pulses into the soil, mapping back subtle anomalies, a density change here, an odd shape there, nothing solid enough to put on a billboard, everything solid enough to put a shovel in the ground. They dug. It was slow, careful work, layers peeled back with the patience of surgeons. Rock, dirt, tangled roots, bits of trash that had blown down from the highway, a crumpled soda can from 1993, a sun-bleached scrap of plastic, a rusted bottle cap. Then deeper, something else, a fragment, curved, white against the dark soil. Someone swore under their breath. Someone else called for the forensic anthropologist. More pieces emerged, small, weathered, not a full skeleton, not a neat outline, not a clean body lying in cinematic pose, just bones, scattered and disjointed by erosion and time, a partial jaw, a section of rib, a femur thinner than it should have been, belonging to someone young. The hillside had been rearranging this grave for decades, each rainstorm a quiet vandal. They worked in silence, the significance of each uncovered inch pressing down like extra gravity. Bags were labeled, photographs taken, measurements recorded. Above, on the shoulder of the road, the wind whipped at the yellow tape, making it snap and crackle like static. Tom stood at the edge of the ravine, watching, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles went white. He'd always known, in some dark corner of himself, that if the earth ever gave her back, it wouldn't be as a miracle reunion. It would be as this. Bones and fragments, a forensic puzzle instead of a living girl, but knowing it didn't soften the impact when they finally lifted the remains out of the ground. Could be animal, one of the younger deputies whispered. Could be, the anthropologist said, but it isn't. The bones went to the lab. Along with them, samples of soil, bits of cloth tangled around a crackling fragment of something that might once have been a shirt. The ravine gave up everything it had been willing to keep for almost half a century. Now it was up to science to translate what the hillside had been saying all along. The news didn't stay quiet for long. It never does. Someone saw the tape. Someone saw the trucks. A drone operator posted a blurred video. By evening, the local station had it framed against a somber anchor. Human remains recovered near site of 1979 cold case disappearance. The word likely floated through every sentence as a legal lifeline. Likely connected. Likely the victim. Likely the end of a 4-decade search. For the Arden family, likely hit harder than any certainty. Chase sat in the lab's waiting area days later, the walls a neutral color that didn't succeed in being comforting. A vending machine hummed in the corner. A clock ticked with obnoxious precision. The door opened and Nina stepped out, a file in her hands, her expression careful. "Is it her?" he asked, not bothering with small talk. She didn't insult him with a preamble. "We've compared everything we can," she said. "Bone development matches, approximate age matches. Old dental records line up with what we found in the jaw. We're doing DNA, but..." She hesitated, then met his eyes. "Yes, we're as sure as we can be without rewriting time. It's her, Chase." There are no words for what happens in a person's face when hope and grief collide at full speed. For years, Chase had lived in a state of suspended imagination, wondering if his sister had died quickly, if she'd suffered, if she might somehow have survived with no memory, no way to reach him. Now the possibilities collapsed into a single, brutal line. She had died here, on this cliff, under this sky, and the earth had held on to her, while the rest of them carried the weight of not knowing. He let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a laugh, something raw and broken and strangely relieved. "So she never left," he whispered. "All this time, and she never left." Behind the glass, behind the formal words and clean charts, the lab had more to say. There were markings on the bones, subtle, not dramatic, no neat stab wounds, no clear bullet holes, but there were indications of blunt force to the skull, fractures that didn't look like the work of a simple fall. There were patterns in the way the bones had broken that suggested impact, violence, not just gravity. The DA listened as the forensic team laid it out in precise language. Homicidal violence is strongly suspected. Pattern consistent with inflicted trauma. Positioning of remains suggests deliberate placement rather than accidental descent. In other words, someone put her there. Combined with the fingerprint, combined with the pendant in the storage unit, combined with Ward's proximity to the highway and his evasive answers, the shape of the story sharpened. They finally had what cold cases rarely get: a body, a suspect, and a forensic path that linked them, however thinly, across the ravine of time. The decision that had seemed impossible a month earlier now felt inevitable. "We moved," the DA said, fingers tapping the table once, twice, like a gavel. "We charge him. We don't promise the family a conviction, but we promise them we'll stand in a courtroom and say her name where he has to hear it." The indictment dropped like a thunderclap. Man charged in 1979, disappearance of California teen, headlines shouted. Cold case murder officially filed after 46 years. The word solved started creeping into subheadings, then into anchor segments, then into true crime podcasts that treated the story like a narrative arc finally reaching Act 3. Ward's mugshot, new, older, face sagging but eyes still alert, circulated everywhere, on screens, on front pages, on the diner TV where customers went quiet as the familiar stretch of their own highway filled the frame behind him. Some people cheered, some crossed themselves. Some just stared, trying to reconcile the man in the picture with the long, amorphous shape of their fear. In his cell, Ward read the indictment slowly, lips moving. The charges: murder in the first degree, optional enhancements based on special circumstances, a death that had occurred when he was barely older than the girl he was accused of killing, now being dragged into a courtroom decades later. When his lawyer arrived, a sharp-eyed woman with a stack of files and no tolerance for sentiment, she laid out the state's case in crisp lines. The fingerprint, the necklace, the bones in the ravine, the pattern of his life, the way he sat in that interrogation room and talked around the center of the story without ever stepping into it. "They can't put her in my car," he muttered. "They don't have to," she replied. "They're going to try to put you at her car. They're going to call you a predator who moved up and down that coast looking for girls who wouldn't be missed fast enough. They're going to wave maps and photographs and experts in front of a jury and ask them to fill in the blanks with their worst fears. My job is to convince 12 people that the blanks are too big." "And can you?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment, then answered with the only honest word she had. "Maybe." In another part of the state, Nina stood alone in the lab, the pendant lying on a cloth under the magnifier, the bones now carefully logged and stored. The science had done what it could. It had pulled a girl's remains from anonymity, matched them to a name, linked them to a man whose fingerprint shouldn't have been where it was. It had pushed the story forward, forced the law to catch up. But as she turned off the light and the pendant slipped back into shadow, she knew something the headlines didn't, something the term cold case solved never liked to admit. Science could draw lines. It couldn't fill in the last, most painful details. It couldn't say what words were spoken on that highway. It couldn't say if Rachel had begged or fought or run. It couldn't say whether he'd meant to kill her or just meant to scare her and then panicked when gravity finished what he started. All it could say was this: she left home. She reached the highway. She met someone there. She died. The rest would be fought over under fluorescent lights in a room where strangers would sit in a box and decide 4 decades late whether the man at the table was the same shadow that had been standing at mile marker 47 when the world last saw her alive. The courthouse was never built for this kind of story. It was meant for traffic tickets, custody hearings, bar fights that got out of hand on a Friday night. But as the trial date for a 46-year-old murder approached, the building began to sag under the weight of something bigger: cameras on the lawn, satellite trucks humming along the curb, strangers with press badges asking locals to relive a nightmare they hadn't volunteered for the first time around. California 1979 cold case goes to trial. The lower third on the national news read, as if it were a title card, as if the next hour would end with a verdict and a neat fade to black. Inside, nothing was neat. Jury selection came first, the slow sorting of 12 strangers and a handful of alternates who would be asked to do what no one else had managed in 4 decades, say officially what happened on that highway. They sat in rows, summoned from lives that had nothing to do with mile marker 47, teachers, mechanics, retirees, people who'd moved to the area long after Rachel's face had stopped staring from missing person posters and started haunting old newspaper archives instead. The judge's voice filled the room, calm and practiced. "You've heard there has been media coverage of this case," she said. "We will ask each of you, what do you know, and can you set it aside?" Some said they knew nothing. Some said they'd heard something about a girl a long time ago. One older woman, hands clasped tight, admitted that she'd been in high school in '79, that she remembered posters, whispers in the hallway, her mother's sudden insistence on driving her everywhere. "I remember being scared," she said. "I don't remember details, just the fear." "Can you put that fear aside?" the prosecutor asked. "I don't know how you put fear aside," the woman said. "I can listen. I can try to be fair. But it's part of why I am who I am." Defense counsel watched each answer with clinical interest, hunting for bias, for a hint that someone had already written the headline in their head: "Guilty at last." When a man in his 30s admitted he followed true crime podcasts and loved cold case breakthroughs, she politely but firmly requested he be dismissed. When another insisted that if they arrested him after all this time, they must really know, she did the same. Ward sat at the defense table, his suit ill-fitting, his hands folded loosely on the surface in front of him. Age had not made him sympathetic, it had simply made him smaller. The years sanded off any suggestion of menace. He could have been a grandfather, a retired trucker, someone's neighbor fixing gutters on the weekend. The jurors glanced at him, then at the photographs projected on the screen. A young girl, a car on a dark road, bones pulled from a ravine. The contrast felt like a trick. When the jury was finally seated, the clerk read their numbers, not their names, into the record. 12 chairs filled, 12 lives rearranged. For them, the case was no longer a story that happened back then, it was now. Opening statements were the closest thing the courtroom would get to a movie trailer. Compressed, curated, designed to frame everything that came after. The prosecutor rose first, buttoning his jacket, facing the jury with the steady gaze of someone who had rehearsed this moment with every piece of evidence, every photograph, every report. In 1979, he began, a 17-year-old girl named Rachel Arden disappeared from a highway near her home. For 46 years, her family lived with questions and no answers. Today, we will show you those answers. They won't come in the way we wish they would. We can't turn back time. We can't bring her back. But we can show you who touched her car, who lived near that road, who kept a piece of her in a box for decades, and who left her in a ravine like she was something to be discarded. He spoke of the fingerprint, of the storage unit, of the heart-shaped pendant. He spoke of the bones and the fractures, of the pattern of Ward's movements along the coast. He said words like deliberate, predatory, no accident. He painted the absence of a confession not as doubt, but as the final act of a man who had spent his life moving through the cracks between crimes. The defense will tell you this is coincidence, he said, voice hardening, that he touched the car by chance, that the necklace is just a necklace, that the ravine gave up a body but not a story. They will ask you to believe in a world of accidents stacked exactly where this man walked. We will ask you to believe something else. We will ask you to believe that even after 46 years, the truth leaves fingerprints. Then it was the defense's turn. Ward's lawyer stood, her suit precise, her tone cool. She didn't pace, she didn't shout. She simply walked to the center of the room and let the silence stretch until the jurors' eyes were on her and the sound of pen on paper had stopped. This case, she said, is not about whether something terrible happened in 1979. It did. A girl disappeared. A family suffered. A town was frightened. This case is about whether the man sitting here, she gestured to Ward without looking at him, is the person responsible beyond a reasonable doubt. And after 46 years, with no eyewitnesses, no confession, no clear physical link between her and him, doubt is not only reasonable, it is everywhere. She pointed out what the prosecutor had not mentioned, the missing witness statements lost to time, the degraded DNA, the impossibility of reconstructing every moment of a night before half the people involved were even born. She spoke of confirmation bias, of the human tendency to see patterns where pain demanded them. They will show you a fingerprint on a car, she said. They will not show you when it was left there. They will show you a necklace. They will not prove it belonged to her. They will show you a man with a bad life story and invite you to fill in the blanks with your fear. She ended with a phrase that landed like a stone. This is not an episode of a show where everything lines up by the final credits. This is real, and in the real world, we think he did it is not enough to take the rest of a man's life. The jury listened. The judge watched. The family sat in the first row, a small constellation of loss. Chase, in a suit that didn't quite fit, his hands knotted together. Irene, brought in a wheelchair, her eyes unfocused, but her presence undeniable, like a living exhibit of the time that had passed. Then came the evidence, piece by piece. Nina took the stand, sworn in under the solemn ritual that turned her from a person into the state's forensic expert. She explained the fingerprint analysis, the latent card from 1979, the way modern imaging had coaxed clarity from old powder and tape. She walked the jury through APHIS, the matching algorithm, the statistical probability that the print belonged to anyone other than Ward. Could the system be wrong? The defense asked on cross-examination. Any system has a margin of error, Nina replied. That's why the final call is made by a trained examiner, not a computer. I examined the print. I compared it to Mr. Ward's known prints. In my professional opinion, they match. Could someone else have an overlapping pattern? It's theoretically possible, she admitted. But we look at multiple points of comparison. We make that determination only when the likelihood of another source is exceedingly low. Exceedingly low, the defense repeated. Not zero. Nothing in forensics is zero, Nina said. We deal in probabilities, not absolutes. The jurors scribbled, some frowned. One leaned back, gaze flicking between Nina and Ward as if trying to see the ridge patterns with his naked eyes. The storage unit photos came next. The jewelry box, the ring, the chain, the pendant. Projected larger than life on the courtroom screen, the heart shape looked almost vulgar in its simplicity, like a cliché pulled from a catalog. The prosecutor treated it with reverence. "Does this pendant have any identifiers?" he asked the lab tech. "No engraving," the tech said. "No serial numbers. It's a common style." "How, then, is it relevant?" "It was found among Mr. Ward's personal possessions, stored for years," the tech said. "And it matches the description of a necklace reported as missing with the victim in 1979. "Matches the description," the defense echoed later, pouncing on the wording. "Not is the same pendant, correct?" "Correct." "If I went to a jewelry store, could I find one like it?" "You might," the tech admitted. "It's a generic design." "So we have a generic necklace in a generic box, and we are being asked to assume it is a trophy from a specific crime 46 years ago." The jury shifted. The connection, once blazing in the heat of discovery, dimmed slightly under the fluorescence of scrutiny. The most brutal testimony came from the forensic anthropologist. Clinical language wrapped around something almost unspeakable. "The fractures on the skull are consistent with blunt force trauma," she said, pointer aimed at diagrams rather than the actual bones. "The pattern is not typical of a simple fall, especially given the surrounding terrain. The distribution of remains suggests initial placement above the current recovery site, followed by post-mortem movement due to erosion and water flow. In my opinion, this is not an accidental death." "Can you say with certainty how she died?" the defense asked. "I can give you probable mechanisms," the doctor said. "Certainty, in cases this old, is rare." "Can you place Mr. Ward at the moment of death?" "No," she said simply. "That is not within my expertise." Witness after witness took the stand, each adding a brushstroke to a picture that refused to come fully into focus. Old co-workers of Ward who half remembered his temper. Bar patrons who thought they might have seen him talking to a girl once but weren't sure which girl or which night. Locals who recalled rumors of a creepy guy in a truck back in the day but couldn't swear it was him. Tom testified too. His voice carried the gravel of years, the weight of a career defined, in his own mind, by the one case he hadn't closed. "We did everything we knew how to do at the time," he said, "but what we knew then wasn't what we know now. We didn't have the tools, we didn't have the databases. When the fingerprint hit came in, it was like hearing a voice from that highway finally call back." The defense tried to chip at him. "Is it fair to say, Detective, that this case has haunted you?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Is it fair to say you feel a personal need to see it resolved before you die?" "Yes." "So when a fingerprint match appeared, is it possible that your desire for resolution influenced how you interpreted everything that came after?" "It's possible for desire to exist," he said slowly. "It's my job to recognize it and step around it. I didn't run this case alone. There are checks, there are protocols, there is evidence outside of my feelings. But your feelings are part of this story," the defense said, "as are Mr. Arden's. As are every person's who ever looked at that highway and thought, something evil happened here. Feelings don't convict. Facts do." Through it all, Ward remained mostly still. His only significant moment came during Chase's testimony. They called him to the stand to talk about Rachel as a person, the impact of her disappearance. It wasn't strictly necessary for the mechanics of guilt and innocence, but it mattered. The jurors needed to know who she was beyond the photographs and bones. "She was loud," he said, a faint smile cutting through the tension. "She sang in the kitchen. She talked back. She got straight A's and still joked about dropping out to become a rock star. She loved this stupid heart necklace, kept taking it off when she washed dishes. My mom would yell at her about losing it." His voice cracked. "She was annoying. She was perfect. She was my sister." "Do you see the man you believe is responsible for her death in this courtroom today?" the prosecutor asked. Chase's eyes slid to Ward, who stared back, expression unreadable. "Yes," Chase said. "I do." "What makes you say that?" The defense pressed on cross, ready. "Because he's the one who touched her car," Chase said. "Because he's the one who had a necklace like hers in a box. Because he's the one who sat there and talked about maybe stopping, maybe helping, like she was a problem he almost fixed." "That's not evidence," the defense said gently. "That's grief talking." "You're right," Chase said. "It is. But I've lived with this longer than anyone in this room, including him, and sometimes grief knows what you won't admit." The judge struck part of the exchange from the record. The jurors were instructed to disregard opinion, to focus only on facts. But words have a way of sticking to the undersides of instructions, clinging there. Day after day, the case unfolded like a slow-motion replay of a night no one had seen in real time. Outside, pundits analyzed each development, filling airtime with speculation. Some declared the case effectively solved long before the jury ever heard closing arguments. Others called it paper thin, a prosecution built on nostalgia for justice. Inside the courtroom, the story sat, heavy, balanced between two phrases that had never felt so far apart and so close together. He did it. You can't prove he did it. When the evidence finally ran out, when every witness had been dismissed and every exhibit logged, the lawyers stood one last time. The prosecutor spoke of patterns, of probabilities, of a man whose fingerprint on a frightened girl's car was not an accident. The defense spoke of time, of missing details, of the danger of turning most likely into beyond a reasonable doubt, just because everyone wanted the story to end. The judge read the instructions. The jurors filed out, carrying the entire weight of 1979, 2025, and everything in between into a small private room with a locked door and a long table. Outside, the cameras waited. Inside, 12 strangers sat down and faced a question that had followed an entire town for almost half a century. After everything you've seen, after everything you've heard, after all the headlines and the bones and the fingerprints and the grief, what do you believe happened on that road, and can you say, with the kind of certainty the law demands, that the man in that chair is the one who made sure Rachel Arden never came home? Deliberation rooms don't look like places where history changes. They look like break rooms without the vending machine, anonymous walls, a table scarred by years of elbows and pens, 12 chairs that don't quite match. But it's where everything that's loud outside goes quiet, where microphones stop recording, where the story everyone's been watching turns into something private and small and terrifyingly human. They filed in with notebooks under their arms and instructions echoing in their heads. Don't talk to anyone. Don't look up coverage. Don't decide until you've heard it all. Now they'd heard it all. Now it was just them, a stack of exhibits in plastic sleeves and a question that had waited 4 decades for an answer. For a while, no one spoke. The clock on the wall ticked, loud and indifferent. Someone coughed, someone shuffled papers, someone stared at the fluorescent lights and thought about how much they hated fluorescent lights. Finally, a woman in her 50s, the one who remembered the fear in the late 70s but not the details, cleared her throat. "We should pick a 4-person," she said. It was decided more by eye contact than by vote. A man in his 40s, a high school science teacher who'd spent the trial taking meticulous notes in tiny, neat handwriting, found himself elected simply because no one else wanted the job as badly as he wanted to make sure it was done right. "Okay," he said, exhaling. "Let's start with the obvious. The charge is murder. The standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. Not beyond any doubt, not beyond all doubt, just beyond reasonable doubt. Maybe we start with a poll, anonymous, gut check." They wrote on slips of paper, folded them, dropped them in a manila envelope someone found in a drawer. The teacher counted them silently, lips moving. When he finished, he set the pile down and looked around the table. 8 guilty, he said. 4 not guilty. No one cheered. No one swore. Faces tightened, shoulders straightened. The lines were drawn, and not where anyone could see them from the outside. One of the not guilty votes belonged to a young woman in her late 20s, hair pulled back, eyes sharp. She worked in tech. She liked data, charts, clean inputs leading to clean outputs. "I believe something terrible happened," she said. "I'm not sure I believe they proved it was him." "Fingerprint," one of the older jurors answered immediately. "On the car, at the scene. They lost him because the system was behind. Now they found him." "What else do you need?" "I need to know when he touched it," the younger woman said. "It could have been that night. It could have been a week earlier. They don't know. They can't tell me. They're asking me to fill that gap with my imagination." "She didn't make a habit of driving around letting strange men touch her door," a middle-aged man snapped. "Come on, use common sense." "Common sense is not evidence," she shot back. "That's literally what they told us." The woman in her 50s, the one with the teenage memories of extra locks and fearful parents, spoke next, voice soft. "It's not just the print," she said. "It's the necklace. It's the way he talked. It's the way he never said, 'I wasn't there.' He said, 'Maybe I helped.' That's not how innocent sounds." "Innocent sounds all kinds of ways," another juror said quietly. "My brother got arrested once because he looked like somebody on a blurry tape. He babbled nonsense the whole time they questioned him because he was scared. They thought that made him guilty. It didn't." They went around and around. The teacher wrote categories on a legal pad: forensics, timeline, behavior, alternative explanations. Under forensics, he listed fingerprint, bones, ravine, necklace. Under behavior, he wrote Ward's evasiveness, his movements along the coast, his collection of old junk that sometimes felt like trophies and sometimes just felt like the leftovers of a rootless life. "Let's take them one by one," he said. "Fingerprint. Who thinks it's a strong piece of evidence? Hands went up. 11 of them. Who thinks it's enough by itself? Most of those hands went down. Necklace, he continued. Connection to victim. Uncertain, but found among his things. Does it lean you one way or the other? It leans me toward creepy, the tech woman said, not toward beyond a reasonable doubt. What about the ravine? Another juror asked. Her bones were there. That's not in dispute. The anthropologist said it's likely homicide. Somebody killed her. We're not debating whether she died. We're debating who put her there. They talked through the timeline, where Ward had lived, where he'd worked, how close he'd been, the construction job near the highway, the bar where Rachel sometimes went, the rust-colored truck with a missing taillight. How many men in that era drove rust-colored trucks with missing taillights? Too many, not enough. Opinions split again. Then there were the absences. No witnesses, no DNA, no confession. If this were a case from 5 years ago, the science teacher said, would you convict on this? That's not fair, someone replied. If it were a case from 5 years ago, we'd have cameras, phone records, text messages. We don't. We have what we have. So do we lower the bar because time passed? The young woman asked. Is the standard softer because the case is older? That feels wrong. What feels wrong, the older woman said quietly, is telling that family after everything that we listened, we saw, we believed something bad happened, and then we shrugged. We're not here to soothe them, the teacher said, though his stomach tightened as he thought of Chase's face on the stand. We're here to apply the law. The day wore on. Lunch arrived in plastic containers that went mostly untouched. Coffee cooled in cups. At one point, a juror asked if they could see the photograph of the car again, the one with the open door and the black void beyond the headlights. They studied it like they were trying to see him there, a shadow leaning in, a hand on the frame. He says he might have stopped to help, one juror said. Do any of you believe that? A few people shook their heads. A few stared at the photo as if the answer might be hidden in a grain of late 70s film. What if he did? The teacher pressed. Is it impossible that he stopped, touched the car, left, and someone else came later? Is that reasonable? The older woman asked. That's the million-dollar word, he said. Reasonable. They sent out notes requesting clarification on jury instructions. The judge sent them back with calm firmness. Reasonable doubt is a doubt based on reason and common sense, not speculation. It does not require absolute certainty. As darkness pressed against the courthouse windows, they took another vote. 10 guilty, 2 not guilty. The line was moving, but not broken. One of the holdouts now was the tech woman. The other was the juror whose brother had once been wrongly accused. He sat with his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the table. I keep thinking about how easy it is to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, he said. They want me to hang everything on a fingerprint left on a surface we can't timestamp. On a necklace that might have been hers and might not. On a feeling that his life looks like the kind of life that does this. You think he's innocent? Someone asked. He shook his head slowly. I don't know. I think he might be. I think he might not be. I think that uncertainty is exactly what reasonable doubt feels like. What about the pattern? The older woman pressed. The other cases, the other highways. They didn't charge him with those, he said. We're not here to fix every mystery on the coast. We're here for one girl, one night, one act. The pattern is smoke. I don't see the fire. The room pulsed with tension that had nothing to do with volume. Voices rose, then lowered. People got up, paced, sat back down. The teacher suggested they take a break, breathe, reset. They did. They came back. The clock kept moving. At some point, someone said we could hang. The words sat there like a weight. Mistrial. No verdict. Years of work stepping into a loop. Another headline. Jury deadlocked in 1979 cold case. Another generation pulling that box back onto a shelf. Is that justice? The older woman asked. Is that what we're going to give them? We couldn't agree? Sorry, continue living in limbo? We're not obligated to give them anything, the tech woman replied, though her eyes were bright. We're obligated to be honest about what we don't know. The science teacher rubbed his temples. Let me ask you both something, he said to the holdouts. If we had this fingerprint, this pendant, these bones, these fractures, this suspect, and the case were fresh, like it just happened last year, would you vote guilty? I might, the tech woman admitted, because I'd expect more to come, more testing, more context. We've got everything we're ever going to get here. This is it. Or we think it is, the other man said. Every time they said, this is all we can do, the next decade proved them wrong. Do you honestly believe, the teacher asked, voice tired, that someone else killed her, left her in that ravine, and somehow the only man we can prove touched her car, who lived there, who kept a heart-shaped necklace like the one she wore in a box for decades? is completely unconnected. The tech woman didn't answer right away. Her hand rested on the photograph of the pendant, fingers not quite touching the glossy paper. When she spoke, her voice was low. "I believe the odds are he did it," she said. "I'm not sure that's the same thing as beyond a reasonable doubt." The older woman leaned forward, eyes steady. "Let me tell you what I remember from '79, she said. "I remember my mom suddenly refusing to let me walk home. I remember her hands shaking when she told me a girl disappeared. I remember looking at the highway and thinking it was a mouth that ate people. For 46 years, every woman in this town has lived with that shadow. You talk about reasonable doubt. I'm asking you to talk about reasonable risk. If we let him walk and he did this, we're saying we see you, we hear you, and we're choosing technical purity over a dead girl's life." "That's not fair," the tech woman whispered. "Nothing about this is fair," the older woman replied. "The only question is what we can live with when we go home." The room sank into silence again. No one moved. Outside, the hallway was empty. The building was locked. The world was waiting on the other side of thick walls and a deliberation sign. Hours passed. The clock's hands crawled toward midnight and then past it. They slept in hotel rooms paid for by the court, woke up with the case still in their teeth, came back to the same table, the same exhibits, the same question. On the second afternoon, the teacher called for one more vote. Not on paper this time. Out loud. Owning it. "Juror 1, he said. "Guilty." "Juror 2, "Guilty." Around the table they went. Some voices steady, some shaking. When they reached the man with the wrongly accused brother, he hesitated for so long that the air felt like it might tear. "Guilty," he said at last, the word clumsy in his mouth. The last holdout was the tech woman. She looked at Ward's name on the indictment, at Rachel's photograph, at the word unsolved written in 1,000 articles since she'd vanished. "I don't know if this is right," she said, "but I know it's the truest thing I can say with what we have." She closed her eyes for a heartbeat. "Guilty." The teacher nodded, throat tight. "We have a unanimous verdict," he said to the ceiling, to the clock, to the ghosts in the room. "We're done." When they filed back into the courtroom, the world snapped back into focus. Everyone rose, the judges' robes rustled, the defendant stood, the family held their breath. It didn't take long, it never does when the words are this heavy. "On the charge of murder in the first degree," the clerk read, voice echoing in the packed room. "How does the jury find the defendant?" The foreperson's voice trembled, but the word itself did not. "Guilty." There was a sound in the room like air collapsing. Somewhere behind the rail, a reporter's pen scratched faster. Somewhere in the back, someone sobbed once, sharply. In the front row, Chase closed his eyes and let his head drop forward, his hands gripping the bench so hard his knuckles went white. Beside him, Irene stared straight ahead, lips barely moving, whispering something only she, and maybe the girl she'd lost, could hear. Ward didn't flinch. For a moment, he almost looked relieved, as if a coin that had been spinning for a lifetime had finally landed on one side. Then his jaw tightened, his lawyer leaned in to whisper about appeals and motions and next steps, and the moment was gone. Outside, the headlines wrote themselves. "California 1979 cold case solved. Jury convicts suspect after 46 years. Decades-old mystery ends in guilty verdict. Family finally hears word they waited a lifetime for." Solved. Ended. Finally. Words people needed to believe. Inside, where the cameras weren't allowed, the reality was softer, stranger. A box on a shelf now had a new label. Closed. A man would grow old and die behind bars, his last view of the sky coming through wire and steel. A family would bury fragments of a girl who'd never had a chance to grow old at all. And still, somewhere under the roar of satisfaction and relief, under the victory speeches and the talk of justice delayed but not denied, a quieter question remained, coiled like a thin wire. Is a story truly solved when the verdict lands, or does the highway keep part of it, no matter what a jury writes on the last page?